working
no.
directly from the field.
You apologize for working.
What's that?
You apologize for working.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Lucy Bisson, and I'm the chairperson of the Lewiston Planning Board. I welcome you all here this evening, and I call this meeting to order. I would like to ask Christine Kittredge for a roll call, please.
Roger Dupre.
Here.
Joshua Najin.
Here.
Michael Marcotte.
Present.
Shanna Cox.
Here.
Lucy Bisson.
Here.
Myself, Christine Kittredge. Amy Smith.
Here.
Lee Albert.
Here.
And Alexander Pine.
Hello.
And for the staff, I would like to indicate that Shelley Norton, Deputy Director, City Planner, is here. David Hediger, Director of Planning and Code Enforcement, and Linda Tripp, the Administrative Assistant. Okay, are there any adjustments to the agenda?
No.
Yes, Amy?
Yes, I'd like to make an adjustment. I make a motion to add a public comment period after agenda item 3, where any member of the public may make comments regarding issues pertaining to Lewiston city government.
Do I have a second?
I would second that.
And I'll call the roll. Roger Dupree?
Yes.
Joshua Najin?
Yes.
Michael Marcotte?
No.
Shanna Cox?
Yes.
Christine Kittredge?
Yes.
Amy Smith?
Yes.
Lucy Bisson, yes. So it passes 6-1. Okay, so after correspondence, after number 3. Okay, so any correspondence?
Yes, I did want to just remind everybody, there was an email David sent out today about FOA training, so we do need to have you do that in the next week. Thank you to those who've already sent that in. If you can email that in when you've got it done, that would be great. There was also a question from one member about planning day and whether we would pay for you to attend. I think we've only had interest from the one person, but if anyone else is interested, let me know. We certainly would do that. And then I also want to point out that we did email out on Friday an email from an abutter for the first project, 952 College Street. So there was a public comment provided by email.
Okay, thank you. All right, in that case, is there anyone who would like to make any comments for a public comment session at this time? Okay, there being none, we'll continue with the meeting. And the number 4 is public hearings. Excuse me. New Roots Cooperative Farm has submitted a development review application to construct 25 new high tunnels and a pack station on the 30-acre parcel located at 952 College Road. Okay, and Craig isn't here, so I assume, Shelley, you'll be taking...
Yeah, so
Okay.
I'll just start by showing you an aerial photo, then I'll pull up a plan, and then I'll talk about the project a little bit. So the parcel that's highlighted is 952 College Road. Down here is primarily the area that you'll be looking at in a blow-up. So I'm just going to pull that up. So there's the existing hoop houses in this location on College Street. There's an entrance here, some parking spaces, and then there will be, this is the field here where they intend to add additional hoop houses. And then the pack station, which we'll also be talking about, is located right here. So this project is being brought forward by New Roots Cooperative Farm. Currently, they have 6 hoop houses, which are a temporary structure located on the property. Those were approved through development review in 2018. They're proposing to add up to an additional 25 hoop houses. They will be the same size as the existing structures, which is 30 feet by 96 feet, and then a pack station, which is 20 feet by 32 feet. The hoop houses are going to be used by individual tenant farmers to extend the growing season. They'll have a small propane heating unit inside. None of the structures have a permanent foundation. They're poles that go in the ground, so they can be moved easily. So there's really very minimal soil disturbance involved with this. But because of the amount of square feet of total floor area, they are required to come forward for development review. The USDA Natural Resources Conservation Services is partnering with them on this project and providing funding for a significant portion of the project. They've also provided assistance in the past, and they'll be conducting a watershed analysis to ensure that they are oriented correctly for runoff. It's a fairly level site, so there's really no concern from the city as far as runoff goes. The city engineer went out and looked at it. There's no requirement for stormwater design because they are temporary in nature, because the water can flow underneath them and still infiltrate into the surface. There's no impervious being created. So I did want to point out that there is a clarification I wanted to give about the financing for the project. The way the application was worded was a little confusing. So just to clarify, there will be an agreement with NRCS for funding for each of the hoop houses. So the one that you have in the packet is an example. Each individual hoop house, there's a grant of roughly $20,000 and change for each hoop house that will be provided. The $10,000 for the pack house is going to be funded through the collective, so the farmers will be providing that funding themselves. So at this point in time, and also because the funding from NRCS is not all provided up front, they don't have those agreements yet. They're being funded kind of over a period of time. So if you wanted, you could have providing financial capacity at a time of building permit application be a condition of approval. Each of the hoop houses will require a building permit. In this case, there's really there's no reason why the city would ever need to expend funds to stabilize the site or take care of a dangerous half-built building. So whether there's financial capacity or not may not have even be a concern for the board with this particular type of project, since they are temporary in nature, and if they don't get constructed, there's really no real change to the site. So. We did have one condition of approval that we recommended, which you could do in addition to the one I just stated, that there be a copy of the completed NRCS inspection job sheet submitted to the city upon completion of the project.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Roger.
Charlie, what exactly is a pack house and what is its function?
So I'll state briefly, and then if the applicant wants to clarify further, they can. They already have a wash station where the farmers can come wash their produce, and this would be next to it, which would allow them to pack the produce more easily into containers for taking to farmers market or wherever they go. But that might be a question that Mohammed can answer in more detail.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else on the board have any questions for staff? Yes.
Yeah.
Michael?
In the development and review application, under project data, existing impervious surface ratio stated 1/10 of 1%, and then proposed is 0.05 of 1%. That doesn't make any sense.
All right, yeah, there might be an error there. Let's take a peek. Oh, okay. Yeah, so in the parentheses, it says 1% and 5%, so it may be that decimal is...
Decimal point is put in an inappropriate place?
Yeah, for the 1%.
In both cases, differently, inappropriately.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And make a note of that.
Okay.
I may have others, but I'll wait.
Okay, Alex?
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in about this one. First, I wanted to have this in the public record. I received notice of this application because I have some property that's in the neighborhood, so just wanted to have that be above board. I have no financial stake in this. There's no, chance of interference here. So.
Plus, you're not voting on this issue
And I'm not
anyways.
voting on it either. So, lots of reasons why this isn't a problem. I did want to talk to staff a little bit about some guidance that I had read from the state in terms of how they approach hoop houses as structures. And they had some guidance, and I was wondering if you had reviewed any of those materials from the Department of Forestry at all, in looking at this application. They tend to recommend that they recommend that hoop houses should be treated as farm equipment rather than as structures. And that just makes it easier for farm operations to move them around and, place them on appropriate fields and things like that as needed. Is that something that staff has looked at and this is where we've ended up, or is it something that's sort of on the docket? Because I know farmland use is something that staff has been thinking about.
Some of the board members may remember that came up last time we reviewed this. Actually, I think there were some people here. I'm not sure what organization they represented, but they were questioning why we brought them through this process, similar to the reasons Alex just mentioned. And really, until our ordinance is amended, these meet our definition of a structure. So for better or for worse, it goes through this process. We've talked about it in-house as to whether or not maybe there's an amendment warranted. I don't know. At this point, I'd say, though, we are adding 25 hoop houses to a property, which is significant out there. At the same time, as Shelley noted, from an impervious perspective, it's a moot point. That these things aren't adding any stormwater out there. I don't know if it's just hoop houses or other structures. I know we've had conversations in the past with other operators who are interested in actually doing maybe more of a greenhouse operation where there was going to be lighting in these establishments 24/7. That could be an issue for neighbors depending on where it is, but that's the explanation, I guess, as far as we're aware of it, but we haven't made any changes locally.
Would it be okay if I send along the document that I have from the state? Just so you can take a look at it.
Okay. All right, great. Michael, did you have anything else?
I was just thought of something, while everyone was talking. Aquifer, maybe it comes down to definitions. I think I read somewhere there was no aquifer here, but there is a well, so there is groundwater that can be impacted by phosphorus, et cetera.
Yeah, so I don't believe that the extension of the growing season, which is really the purpose of the hoop houses, will impact, let's say, the amount of fertilizer or other things that they would be using on site, would be my guess. So I don't think that there's an increase necessarily that we would be considering with this.
And I was going to wait till later, but I would suggest that emailed letter become part of the permanent record.
Yep.
Okay. All right, Josh?
Just a couple of points to come back to food sovereignty in particular, and so that's a piece too that I think possibly the Good Food Council of Lewiston Auburn might be able to
You want to
give some
speak in the mic?
Possibly the Good Food Council of Lewiston Auburn might be able to give some guidance on hoop houses, especially in agricultural areas. We've found that the work that I do, it's really difficult to run a farm for produce in particular in Maine without a facility like a hoop house. And I just wanted to ask, on the application it says an urban impaired stream watershed. It says no. If yes, watershed name. Is Stetson Brook not an urban impaired watershed?
It is not. Stetson Brook and Hart Brook are, yes, we get that right. No, Hart Brook and Jepson Brook are impaired. Stetson Brook is not.
Okay.
All right. At this time, I'd like to invite the applicant to come up and tell us a little bit about this, if you want to. You don't have to, you don't want to, but if we have any questions, it would be good if we could ask them to you.
Yeah.
Okay. Would you identify your name and address for the record?
Omar Hassan, 954 College Road, so 952 on the record. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. I'll start the questions. Do you plant once you have the hoop house up, I mean, are your plants in the ground or are they on raised beds?
On the ground.
They're in the ground, okay. Anyone else have any questions for the applicant? Yes, Josh?
Do you have an idea of how much this will increase your capacity for growth as far as food for the local food economy?
We were looking maybe double it. Extending the season is always hard here in Maine.
Sure, sure. Anyone else have any questions? Amy?
Just wondering, so where the hoop houses are going, is that farmland already being farmed?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they're all farmland.
Okay, great. All right, anyone else have any questions of the applicant? No? Okay, at this time, I will open it up to the public. Is there anyone in the public who wishes to speak for or against this project? If you would step up to the podium, state your name and address, and you have 3 minutes to say your piece. Anyone want to speak? Yeah, no one wants to speak? Okay, in that case, I will close the public portion, bring it back to the board, and at this time, I would entertain, any other questions or comments from the board?
I have a question for staff.
Certainly.
Your memo notes clearly that this is already designated a rural agricultural zoning district, and that the property has been and continues to be, and this project proposes its continued use as an agricultural working piece of property in an agriculturally zoned district. And do we review with any other farms engaging in agricultural activity any questions about their plantings, where they're planted, how they feed them, how they fertilize them? Is that anything that we do with any other agricultural properties in the city of Lewiston?
No, I mean, it would only come up if somebody was building a structure and coming for either staff review or planning board review during development review. It might be relevant or it might not.
Thanks. I have no further questions, and I appreciate the work the applicants do.
Yes, we do. Yes, Michael?
Just another technical point.
Sure.
On Exhibit A, which I believe is something to do with the deed. I believe that the fourth line down in the second paragraph should have been brook, and it says book. The R, I think, was left out.
Okay.
That being a legal document, that's quite important.
Yeah, that's not something that we have any
Control
purview
over, yeah.
over.
But
That's just a copy of what's in the Registry of Deeds.
but
Blame
it
the
is-
lawyer who drafted it.
But it is a legalism.
Oh, yeah. Okay, at this time, if there's no other questions or comments, I will entertain a motion.
I will make a motion that the application submitted by Mohammed Sheikh on behalf of New Roots Cooperative Farm for the New Roots High Tunnel and Pack Station at 952 College Road meets the necessary criteria contained in the Zoning and Land Use Code, including but not limited to Article 13, Section 4, approval criteria, and that the approval be granted with the following condition: that a copy of the completed NRCS inspection job sheet must be submitted to the city upon completion of the project.
Second that.
Okay, and any further discussion? In that case, I'll call the roll. Roger Dupree?
Yes.
Joshua Najin?
Yes.
Michael Marcotte?
Yes.
Shanna Cox?
Yes.
Christine Kittredge?
Yes.
Amy Smith?
Yes.
Lucy Bisson, yes. All right, go build your,
Thank
go
you.
build your.
Grow some food.
Yeah, go grow some food, absolutely, absolutely. All right. Okay, the next public hearing is Gorrill Palmer, on behalf of JLM Enterprises LLC, has submitted a development review application to construct a 172-unit mixed-use building with a footprint of 20,180 square feet at 3 Lowell Street. And I assume we're going to hear from Shelley again, since Craig isn't here again.
Okay, so this project is the construction of a 6-story, 172-unit mixed-use structure with a 20,180 square foot footprint, which would be located on a newly created parcel. So this is also a subdivision, which is currently developed as a parking lot. The project spans the addresses 3 Lowell Street and 200 Main Street. This is located in Centreville, which allows the mixed-use building as well as retail and apartments. The project will contain a rear courtyard, which will count towards the amenity space. It also will be utilizing off-site parking in the parking garage located at 26 Chapel Street. 129 parking spaces are required. The first floor will contain a 3,000 square foot retail or restaurant space, a number of common area elements, including lobby, fitness area, and then there will be residential units on that first floor as well, and then the other 5 stories are all residential in nature. The parking lot that that the parcel is currently on will be reduced in size, so it will continue to serve adjacent buildings that are unrelated to this project, and all of the parking for this new building will be in the parking garage. So they will be removing part of the parking garage. A certain portion of it will be resurfaced, and it will be made smaller. Okay. So this project has a couple of waivers that they are requesting. The first is for some of those residential units on the first floor. Because of slopes, the applicant has stated that they are doing a couple of, at least one break, I guess it is, in the elevation of the foundation, the finished floor, and the portion along Middle Street, I believe it is, and they can speak more specifically to this. The finished floor of those apartments is not 21 inches higher than the sidewalk outside the windows, if you will. So the intent would be that usually the apartment would be higher than the grade outside, and in this case, they're the same, or it's even sunken 6 inches, the apartments from the sidewalk. Then there's also a request for relief from the requirement that those first floor windows be 60 inches above the grade. So they've stated the variation that they would need from that as well. So that's the first waiver. Then the second waiver is from the amenity area. 8,600 square feet is required. Based on their courtyard in the back and some of the walking sidewalks that are being created, they've stated they have 6,300 square feet provided exterior to the building. As you know, we don't allow interior amenity spaces at this time to count towards that. There will be a gym in the building, and then they also will be close, well, right next to the river walk once that eventually is extended. And there is, the park over down Main Street and over by Veterans Park area that they could access as well. So those are the 2 waivers that they've requested. I've outlined in the review here the requirements for those waivers, and the board should go through that criteria, determine if you believe the waivers should be granted, and make a motion on the waiver requests. There were a couple of items that made it to recommended conditions of approval. The first was that the financial capacity, the applicant has asked for a more detailed finding on that to be at the time of a building permit, stating that at this point, the final cost of the building is still to be determined. And so they're asking to provide that proof at a later date. There are some design elements that are still in the works in terms of the streetscape and working out with the city what is going to happen for off-site improvements. So there is a agreement between the city and the developer, as well as the developer for 55 Middle Street, which is right across Lowell Street, for the utilities to be put underground and then for certain kind of street elements to happen. So the way that's worded, the intent is that there would be, there would be work done together, the city with those two developers, to determine off-site improvements. So we just have that as a condition of approval, that there'd be work done to finalize the off-site improvements for utilities and sidewalk. We would want to see a copy of the parking agreement with the parking garage to prove that they have the 129 spaces that are required for that many apartments. We also would want to see the capacity to serve for water and sewer, which is still forthcoming from Public Works. And then finally, there were a couple of comments that staff had that we were kind of working through with the applicant last week, and they provided a letter kind of detailing what those changes would be, and we would just want to see those made prior to the signing of the final drawings. They're pretty minor in nature, but just wanted to kind of encapsulate that in the conditions as well. And then we have a requirement that prior to certificate of occupancy, that their design engineer would certify that everything was done according to plan. So those are the conditions that staff is recommending be part of the review.
Okay, I have a question, Shelley. They're requesting 2 waivers, but we only have 1 waiver motion. So, I mean, I assume that we'll probably, approve both, but shouldn't there be 2?
So I think
For the-
it completely depends on how you want to do it. So in fact, there's really, you could even split it out as 3 waivers, in that the 21-inch elevation for finished floor and the 60-inch for the window are both part of our ordinance as one item. But you could treat them separately as separate requests if the board wanted to, if you had different findings for each of those standards. And then certainly you would want to treat that separately necessarily than the amenity space if you wanted to. So in the past, I think the board has typically done 1 motion when you don't have any findings that are inconsistent for any of the items. But you can always, as you're looking through what the review criteria is, if there's something specific that members don't feel that the amount of request is justified, you could certainly treat them separately.
Okay, thank you. Michael?
I had a question in my mind over the weekend on that particular item as well. At first, when I started reading the packet, I thought we had already done this. In a conversation with Dave, I learned that, okay, it's across the street, it's almost an identical flip side, which is why these waiver requests were familiar to me. I don't recall whether we did them separately or all at once the last time. It's probably a couple meetings back.
I don't remember.
Why I asked about minutes earlier. I remember having some grief over some of the waivers, and that's why it's near the top of my list here tonight, is because I didn't necessarily like them last time. I don't remember how I voted for them individually or as a whole. But I would prefer to have them individualized.
Okay, all right. Anyone else have, Shannon?
Yeah. Can I start with a follow-up to Planning Board Member Marcotte's question?
Yes, certainly.
Would you like to see the 60 and the 21-inch separated from each other, or just request 1 from 2?
Each one, just
So that would be
do a
3.
vote on each one.
Okay, so that would be 3. Okay.
And then my other question's for staff.
Absolutely.
And I'm asking this in a way that gives the applicant opportunity to address this when they're presenting as well. So it's a 2-part question. But I guess my question is, if we waive and meet these waiver requests for both of these, in my recollection, oftentimes when we waive something, we give it a close standard. And I'm just curious about the way in which we can provide language and guidance that allows us to give flexibility to the applicant. But for example, and I don't believe that this is the intent, but until we address that particular spot in the design overlay that we've mentioned relative to amenity, how can we waive the amenity based on the rationale that it's in this close proximity and that there's pedestrian connectways to those, and that there is a courtyard and a gym, and not leave ourselves open to a final product that has no gym and a courtyard, right? So like, what does it look like for us from a process perspective to manage these requests that say, in lieu of 50 feet per unit, will provide these amenities, and part of the language that we're looking to adapt is to recognize amenities that are offered internally to the structure as an amenity, and that's part of the kind of flaw that we're theoretically working on. But how can we waive that in a way that doesn't allow an applicant, this or another one, to say, great, there's no amenities required, and now we can regain that square footage for profit? So what does it look like for us to make a motion that addresses this request and still meets that goal of intent?
Yeah, so with the courtyard, I think generally you're covered because we have that condition of approval that the engineer would certify that it's been constructed according to plan, so that's kind of a certain size. As far as the internal spaces, you could certainly make a requirement that there be a gym. You could have a discussion with the applicant as to kind of what size are they thinking, and maybe, you know, say it's a minimum of whatever size, something like that, if that seems reasonable to them. So I think there's a dialogue to be had with the applicant on that. As far as the other two, I think that what we haven't always done, but you could certainly do, is provide a relief percentage, if you will. So if, 21 inches is supposed to be the height of the floor and it's 0, that's essentially 100% relief. But, it could be a lesser percent, or, there could be some, some way that you want to structure that.
Certainly, we don't want the windows to be like little transom windows at the top of the unit and there be none, right? Yeah. Not that you're aiming for that, nor would that be marketable, but just trying to find that middle ground that says, yes, we want you to build this, and to that which you've described here today as a variance.
Yeah, because you have in the past, let's say, window percentage, right, as an example, where let's say the 25% they couldn't meet. In this case, they are, but if they came and said, but we could do, 22%, you've typically given an actual number to work with. So you certainly could in these cases as well.
It just, at this stage, I don't think that information's been provided enough for us to put a new stake in the ground that's a metric that you can benchmark later.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions for staff? Okay, in that case, I'd invite the applicants to come up and introduce yourselves and give us your presentation, gentlemen.
Awesome. Happy to be back. Caleb Brassa from Gorrill Palmer. I'm here with Nick Griffin from Cube 3. With us also is Joe Ministo from JLM Enterprises LLC, the owner and applicant here for this project. So, as noted, very similar to the previous project at 55 Middle Street, right across the road at Lowell Street. That's shown just kind of on the top side in gray now on this front cover sheet here. So we'll try to give the condensed version and then kind of turn it over quickly to staff for comments, but I'll flip through some similar slides from the last presentation, but obviously addressing this project now. So again, so for the parcel, tax map 206, lot 201, again, for this project, we'll actually be splitting the lot into two to separate from the larger parking one that also houses the DHHS building on Main Street. Zoning Centerville District, and then the Design District overlay. We know current use is a surface parking lot. The proposed development is 20,180 square foot with 6 stories, 172 residential units with some on the ground floor, and then all of the upper floors as well. That's a mix of, I believe, studios, 1 and 2 beds as well. Nick can touch on that if there's any questions there. There's also the mix of some ground floor commercial space that's required by zoning as well. So there's a couple thoughts that we had for that portion there, which could be retail or a restaurant use as well. We are just required now, and we're before you now looking for a positive approval here from you folks for the major development review. And we had submitted that application on September 25th. We've since answered a few staff comments and worked pretty closely with Shelley to get to this point here. So we're feeling pretty good that we've been able to satisfy a lot of those questions there. Just zooming out, this is just kind of a box view. It kind of gives a little bit more context when you look at the downtown space here and how close we are to the river. the island point there as well, and then Main Street and beyond. So here's the overall site plan that we've adjusted a little bit, but it's very similar to what we were showing in the 55 middle application. Now, of course, we're showing the new building for what we're referring to as Building 2. But for this application, for the 3 Lowell Street project, just above that is the 55 middle that was previously approved, and then also a potential future building site that we've shown now on the Middle Street parcel. This building here, of course, is similar to 55 middle, where all the parking is going to be located in the adjacent Chapel Street parking garage. Just a quick look at the site plan here and what we're doing. So there's actually a little bit to do the lot split and locate this on the surface parking lot. There's a little bit of rework that we'll have to do in that parking lot just to maintain some new spaces and reestablish some landscaped islands and some things there for that existing lot. And then generally we're going to be repaving and resetting new curb for portions of the sidewalk all the way around the property. There actually isn't a sidewalk now on the Lowell Street side of this development, so that will actually be all new sidewalk from the corner of Chapel up to Middle Street there. Quick look at the grading. Of course, you know, one of the things for this application, we have the waiver request for the separation from the first floor. This building, similar to the 55 middle, we're stepping the foundation to really kind of achieve our goals for the internal space here. This one will actually have 2 steps in the building, and that's kind of generally shown with that dark black dashed line that's in there. So I'll kind of hover on the screen here. This would be one of the lines here. That has residential units above, that is kind of set level-ish with Middle Street. This is going to be the central, the kind of center tier. That's the main lobby that receives much of the folks from Lowell Street with the main entrance here. And then the retail space will be set slightly below that with some other kind of primary functions, sprinkler room, electrical room, things like that for the building here. And utilities all, all right adjacent to the site. Much of what we're using, we're actually going to be tapping into Chapel Street, which makes sense for sewer and stuff like that, which is kind of the lowest point of the building here. And then a look at the landscaping view. So one of the things we actually touched on, and we can talk a little bit more in the waiver request, was that for this portion here, we actually added a landscape strip, which we talked about in the last application for 55 middle, where we were trying to, if we couldn't get the actual elevation difference, that 21 inches from the ground floor separation, and then same for the windows with the 60-inch separation, how can we still provide some sort of separation from the sidewalk grade to those residential units? And the big piece, the big talking point I recall with the board from that last application was, let's try to provide some landscaping, have that kind of actual buffer there where we can put in some plantings that can actually grow up a little bit and give folks in those windows a little bit of separation. So now I'll turn it over to Nick to talk a little bit on the amenities pieces.
Thanks, Caleb. Again, my name is Nick Griffin from Cube 3. We're the architect. So if you go back to the ground floor.
Clicking.
It's like autopilot.
Yeah, it's just going.
All right,
I'll try to hold it.
No, sorry. So at the ground floor, as you mentioned, that 3 steps helps get the amenity all along Lowell Street, which is helpful.
Sorry,
I
swear.
But yeah, we were able to pull the resident. I can talk.
Yeah.
I was able to pull the residential all off of Lowell Street, so you have commercial and along Chapel Street, and then amenity through the rest of it. So there's no residential units on Lowell Street. The ones along Middle, where it is level, we did try to pull the building back further than we did on Building 1, which helps give that buffer. And then Chapel Street there, again, raised up. We kept that middle tier high on that side versus stepping down to meet the retail. So those units on the left are at the same level as the amenity, which keeps them above Chapel Street, which helps with the glazing. On the upper floor is just a U-shaped building, double-loaded corridor. Again, mix of studios, 2s and 1s. You may just cancel out of the presentation.
Yeah. I hit escape.
It's hard to.
There we go. Try
So
that.
Making
that's
me seasick,
perfect.
guys.
So this is the
Trade show setting.
This is the elevation along Lowell Street. As you can see in the bottom right is that commercial space. And then as you slightly come up the hill, you have our amenity entry kind of in the center, and then the amenity that gets you all the way up to the corner in Lowell Street. Overall, again, based on feedback and our approach on 55 Middle, we kept a very similar approach here, a little bit different massing, but consistent materials and patterning overall, just to keep this new kind of development area. Go ahead, Shannon.
Is it okay to ask a question, Madam Chair?
Yeah, I think so.
On that one, it looks like there's some ability to like open windows over here, and that we're looking at whatever that street is. Is that Chapel over there?
No,
That would be the middle
Chapel
side
right
on the
That
left.
chapel's on the right,
So-
middle is there.
These ones on Chapel and those ones on Middle look like you are offering some square footage amenity in terms of the porches, which we have declared as an amenity.
And they can be added to
So
your
is that, it's hard
amenity.
looking straight on, but like,
I
are
see you're
those,
saying the
are
up-
those windows that open but you don't step out? Or are those windows that give you
Are they
2
Juliet
feet, 3
balconies, or are
feet?
they real balconies?
No, we'd have a few on the right there, and then on the left, yes,
That are
a
real.
stack of outside.
Those count towards your amenity square footage.
I think actually similarly to your question earlier, we had talked about this with the 55 Middle, where we weren't sure, well, what if we put in our, our testimony here that we are providing balconies, and then ultimately we remove them later on. So I think we more
Don't
or
want
less
them
requested the
counted.
waiver without counting them, if
Okay.
that makes sense.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Thank you.
Of course. But yeah, so overall, again, I'm using the context for larger massing moves that with richer texture and windows as a patterning and rhythm to again match what we've got approved across the street, but also to work with the contextual historical reference in the area. So as you wrap around, this is along Middle Street. And again, we've kind of wrapped that horizontal around the corner along Lowell on the right side, and then we've kind of used this roof line to reach out to the downtown, and you'll be seeing that coming from either direction along Chapel or Middle. And then, yeah, we've broken it up with that stack of balconies in the center to help break down the massing here to the east. As we wrap around, this is the rear elevation that looks back towards the parking. Again, so that center gray and white is recessed back into the center of the C. And you have these kind of 2 tower elements that are reaching back towards downtown. And again, this is the view, not straight on, but skewed you get as you come around the building from Chapel or Middle. So again, this kind of base anchors you across, wrapping around to Lowell Street. And then when you wrap around to Chapel Street, again, you see our amenity here on the bottom left with that reaching out roof towards, as you come around the garage on the proposed Riverwalk there. This would be the corner with that tower element and that balcony that really engages the corner and again with Middle Street across. So as I mentioned, similar to 555 Middle, a combination of some fiber cement siding and panel on the upper floors with accent panels, and then the light masonry base to kind of show where it's more public and more durable material.
I think that's your last one.
Yep.
So with that, we're happy to turn it over to the board and answer any questions you might have.
Okay. Ms. Cox?
Can you take me back to the 3 Lowell Street east elevation graphic that you just had? No, that one.
Whoops.
Nope, that one.
Yep.
That one.
There you go.
Okay. The essentially middle comment on the bottom notes, and this is the place in which your variance is the least for the bottom window elevation, and it looks here like you have an 18-inch above grade where 21 is the minimum, and so you're really looking for a 3-inch waiver.
So the
As I try to put some numbers around what we offer towards your waiver request.
The window is 60 inches, the
The minimum grade.
so the grade separation is the 21 inches. The window, our windows need to be
60 inches
60
from the
inches
ground.
above. So we're missing it by a lot more.
By a lot.
No, yes, thank you, but
But
the
21 inches
18
is the
inches that
floor.
you're showing me is relevant to the 20, oh, it's to the floor?
For the floor, yes.
Not the
So it's-
window.
The 18 inches compares to the 60.
It's 21 inches above the grade of the adjacent sidewalk
Yeah.
for the first
So
floor
of-
elevation.
Of the waiver request 1, of which we're breaking into 2 parts, that there is a 60-inch and there is a 21-inch that is a problem. It is the 21-inch that you were looking to be at 18.
No,
It would be, this one is for the window height is for the 60 inch, this 18 inches that's shown there.
so where we're supposed to be 21 above, we're 0. Our grade is aligned with the first floor, and where we're supposed to be 60, we're only at 18 for windows.
Yeah. It's at least what they asked for when they did the other building. I think it was worse, the other building.
Correct, and this is, again, we tried to minimize the amount just along Chapel Street, and on Middle Street, we are the 21 inches above, but we're not quite the 60 inches, like I said, to prevent the kind of transom windows.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions? Roger?
The Chapel Street garage, is that a public garage, or is that gonna be limited to just the buildings that are there?
I believe it's private.
It is private. It's owned by the owner of Peck's Apartments, the old Peck's building, who's the developer of
55 Middle. Yeah, so they'll be putting together a parking agreement, is what the application had stated for renting those spaces.
Right. Yes, Alex?
I had some questions about, given the fact that it's going to be near this pretty great multi-use trail, and we were also talking about amenity space. When I was looking at the site plan for the ground floor, I didn't notice any indoor bicycle storage or any sort of indoor equipment storage like that. Is that going to be accounted for in the amenity space, or?
Yes, yeah, we just kind of label it as a general amenity, not knowing exactly what, but we intend to have bike storage for the residents.
Gotcha, okay. Yeah, and I just encourage you to have more rather than less, given its location. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about your plans in the courtyard. Reading the plans, it seems like you're just going to do hardscaping, and it's just going to be a big, flat, open space. Given that courtyard is much more exposed than the courtyard on the other project, I'm wondering if there's anything around like programming in that space that you've considered in terms of making it a nicer spot for residents to be in. Also, the fact that it's south-facing and exposed, it's just going to be hit by sun all day and be sort of windswept, I think, a little bit, unless there's maybe plans for shade trees or furniture or something like that. Could you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I don't think we've talked too much about the details, but our normal assessment for courtyards is to have a mix of hardscape and softscape, right? Places for people to lounge. Obviously, it's not large enough for a pool here, but usually it involves either a fire pit or outdoor grills. But yeah, we'd want to have a nice planting here. As you said, it's southern exposed, which helps all our units and helps the space, And up here, we don't get to be outside as much as we want per year, so I think we strive for the south-facing courtyard, but we do need to make sure shade is, and so we do plan to kind of program that a little bit better as we develop.
Okay. And then the last comment I had was, I see that this is just a flip of the other design. The other design works really well because how you're always approaching it is sort of from the retail front, and it sort of hides the residential aspects towards the back, so they're a little more private. This is exactly the opposite. The first thing, that you're going to see is someone's apartment before you go around the corner, and it's much more oriented towards the other building. And I think, it's sort of seeking to create space between those two buildings, and it would be nice to see sort of more integration with the rest of the street sort of scape as you go out from there. I know it's abutting a parking lot, so like how much can you integrate with a parking lot, but still, something to think about.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think that's why we tried to keep very horizontal with our side elevation to try to get people around. And yeah, we've looked at, in both buildings actually, flipping it back and forth. We always kind of had conflict with keeping a southern exposure to the courtyard, but also making sure we're engaging Lowell Street in a more appropriate way. So I think it's a good point, so thank you.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions or comments? I have some comments regarding the apartments themselves. And as we discussed in the last project, I don't see anything, when I looked at the big plans that you gave us, I don't see anything where there's laundry for the facility, or is there in apartment laundry? What kind of, trash? There's one place for trash. Am I gonna have to, if I'm on the 6th floor, do I have to bring my trash bag down to the trash room on the 1st floor? Or, it's not very clear what some of the niceties would be in these apartments. So I'm just wondering.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I think, our plans don't have a lot of detail, but yeah, within each unit, we'd have in-unit laundry. So depending on, the kind of final approach, whether there's stackables or side-by-sides is yet to be determined, but we would assume laundry in every unit. For the trash, we'd have a set of chutes on that west side. So on the upper floor, you can see that tiny little T would be just a room with 2 chutes usually, of trash and recycling. So everyone has trash access on their own floor, and that would all come down to a lower trash room that, maintenance and
Right.
operations would have it with scheduled pickup.
Okay,
But yeah, each unit, kitchen, live-in, bathroom, all kind of open with bedrooms off, depending on the size, and, but yes.
fantastic.
Is there gonna be a dumpster facility?
We would plan to have all the trash remain in that lower trash room, until it's picked up and rolled out by operations.
Anyone else have any questions or comments? Okay.
May I just ask
Yeah,
a
of
question?
course.
So tied to Alex's comment about bikes and more in the name of bike storage, I just was looking on this, the memo from staff where it says 4 bike parking spaces are proposed. Is that shorthand for motorcycle? Or am I supposed to be reading that?
No, it's bicycles.
No, I think
Literally
there's
4
bike
bicycles.
racks in the courtyard area. Maybe you can point those out.
Yeah, that's just the exterior.
It just seems like a small number of bikes, so that's why I asked.
And where we're showing, there's 2 bike hitches here and here. So,
So we
each
plan to
one can
have,
handle 2 at least.
Great. I would just underscore Alex's comment that,
Yeah.
given the number of units, it seems like a very small number of bicycles would be nice to see more.
Staff, would it be possible to suggest to applicants that they talk about the interior storage as well for bicycles in addition to their vehicle parking when they submit an application? I mean, I don't think we'd require it because we don't have any code and regulation around it, but is that something that we could just sort of have a reminder of? Especially for projects like this where they're close to the river walk and, people are moving here for the natural amenities.
Yeah, staff can keep that in mind as a recommendation. We do sometimes make recommendations when we provide comments. The board can also consider, as we review our standards, whether you want to consider requiring greater amount of bike parking. We have a pretty minor amount right now that's required, and don't require any internal covered. So that is something to consider too.
All right, sounds good. All right, yes, Josh.
I just want to bring back a point about, and I know that the stormwater runoff is permitted to run directly into the Androscoggin, but, and also that we don't actually have a guarantee of riverfront access at this point. So those 2 pieces within the FERC relicensing, possibly we look at that. And I know that it's pretty advanced at this point, that process, but again, recreational amenity space was one of the points with the FERC relicensing, and it would be really nice to see that we have a guarantee that we have access to the riverfront there, and then also coming back to the rainwater runoff. I understand that it runs now when the catchments back up into the river, but we should possibly think about some way to catch some more of that. But yeah, it has nothing to do with this particular project, but it will impact the project, obviously. So.
All right, at this time, I'll open it up. Oh, I'm sorry, Amy, go ahead.
Just one question about car charging stations. Are there any included in the plan, or is the owner of the garage going to be putting them in?
There's none included at the moment, but there has been some discussions, I know, looking at certain upgrades like that for the garage.
For the garage?
Yeah, because there's no parking by the house, it's all in the,
Right.
it's all in the garage. Okay.
Thanks.
Sure. In this case, I'll open it up to the public. Anyone who wishes to speak, please go to the podium, introduce yourself, and you have 3 minutes to say what you wish to say. And is there anyone in the public who wishes to speak in favor? Yes, please. Mr. Jeffers, if you're
I'm sort of.
We consider you public.
That's why I'm always like, I'm never quite sure. Am I public? Am I staff? What am
You're
I?
whatever you want to be tonight.
Yeah, I was going to say, to really get into the depth of the development review is not my role. I just wanted to point out this is a project council has been supportive of with tax increment financing. We'll be in front of the council again to help support with some of the outdoor amenities, improving the streetscape, the undergrounding of utilities. And just stepping back, taking the big picture is this is a way to transform a neighborhood that I think has largely been forgotten. This is an area that's been used for surface parking for the 20-plus years I've been here. We've had some minor demolitions there. This is really reclaiming an area of the city that I think most folks, it's parking for the hospital, we don't have to think about it. So my hat's off to the developers for bringing these forward. I'll leave the details to all you, though.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Mr. Jeffers. All right, seeing there is no other public, I'm going to close it to the public, bring it back to the board, and any further discussion, comments, or I'll entertain a motion. Ms. Cox?
I'm on the comment side of that.
Okay,
Sorry.
that's fine. No, that's fine. That's okay.
Gentlemen, I'm looking to have a waiver that gives you what you need and is clear about what we've offered. And so will you help me find the right language? I believe I heard you state that the residential first floor elevation, which is required to be 21 inches, you'd like a waiver that allows it to be 0 inches and ultimately at grade.
Correct.
Is there any reason to think that you would need to recess it in the future and that the 0 would restrict you? Not that that's going to change our opinion on it, but.
No, I don't believe so.
And for the windows, you're looking for windows that have gotten to our 25%, which kudos, to start at 80 inches.
18 inches.
18 inches, sorry, above grade, and not 60.
Correct.
Okay. And the other waiver is the amenities.
Yeah, I don't have any questions about
Okay.
that. You've named a gym. Do you have a square footage of internal amenities that you can offer? And can we count the retail as an amenity? No.
No.
Even if it's a really good coffee shop, it doesn't count? Okay, just checking.
Hey, you tried, you
If
tried.
they're having yoga classes at the coffee shop, then maybe.
I mean, so we can count the courtyard as represented on the plans that we're looking at today, so don't make it smaller. But do you have some idea of the internal amenity square footage?
So generally, that 4,500 is what we're assuming includes all of our kind of amenity. That would be
Mailroom and all the
mailroom,
jazz.
lobby, game room, business center. So we haven't really determined the specifics there, but gyms, it could be as small as 800 square feet. It could be as large as 1,500 maybe. It's a smaller general amenity, but the range.
Okay. Okay. Any further comments from anyone on the board? In that case, I would entertain some
Couple
motions.
I'm gonna take a stab at it for us.
Sure.
Unless anyone else wants the honor.
No? Well, go ahead.
Okay. I'd like to begin by making a motion that the application submitted by JLM Enterprises LLC for the construction of a 6-story, 172-unit mixed-use structure on a new 28,223 square foot parcel at 3 Lowell Street meets all of the necessary criteria contained in Article 11, Section 24.5H waiver request and Article 13, Section 8.1A, and that a waiver request be granted that allows for the first floor elevation to be at street level with a 0-inch variance above grade to the adjacent sidewalk along Chapel Street and Middle Street.
Do I have a second?
Okay.
Okay. Any further discussion? In that case, I'll call the roll. Roger Dupree?
Yes.
Joshua Najin?
Yes.
Michael Marcotte?
No.
Shanna Cox?
Yes.
Christine Kittredge?
Yes.
Amy Smith?
Yes.
Lucy Bisson? Yes. So that's 6-1.
I'd like to make a motion that the application submitted by JLM Enterprises LLC for the construction of a 6-story, 172-unit mixed-use construction on a new 28,223 square foot parcel at 3 Lowell Street meets all of the necessary criteria contained in Article 11, Section 24.5H waiver requests and Article 13, Section 8.1A, and that a waiver request be granted that allows for the first floor windows to be at a minimum of 18 inches above grade, and not 80.
Yes. Do we have a second? Okay. Any further discussion?
Point of inquiry.
Yes?
So there's two pieces to number one, so there'll actually be four motions when it's all
Yes.
done? Okay.
Yeah. As-
I was just expecting something in number two to be
Oh,
part
no,
of
no.
that motion.
No, we've got two for the windows
Two for- okay.
and then one for the amenities.
Which
Okay.
gives me 3 and not 4.
For waivers, there'll be 3 waivers and then the.
4 motions.
Yeah, but there'll be 4 motions, right, that's what he's saying. There'll be 4 motions in total. Okay,
No, wait a minute.
I don't think
The
that's what
fourth one is the overall, I believe.
correct, yeah.
There's still going to be an amenity and a discharge, right?
I
No,
don't believe the discharge is separate.
The discharge is actually a waiver that's granted by Public Works Director, and so that was approved by staff during their stormwater review. So it's
We're not voting on that.
not a
No.
waiver for you, this board,
I'd
yeah.
just like to register my displeasure over that.
okay. All right, so in that case, I'll call the roll on the height of the window waiver. Roger Dupree,
Yes.
Joshua Najin,
Yes.
Michael Marcotte,
No.
Shanna Cox,
Yes.
Christine Kittredge,
Yes.
Amy Smith,
Yes.
Lucy Bisson, yes. So that's 6-1 on the second waiver. And the third waiver.
I'd like to make another motion that the application submitted by JLM Enterprises LLC for the construction of a 6-story, 172-unit mixed-use structure on a new 28,223 square foot parcel at 3 Lowell Street meets all of the necessary criteria contained in Article 11, Section 24.5H waiver requests, and Article 13, Section 8.1A, and that a waiver request be granted.
Second.
Oh, I'm going to finish my sentence. Sorry, Roger, but I appreciate it. I appreciate the support. That a waiver request be granted that to the amenity area standards and ensures that the amenity waiver meets a 4,500 square foot internal amenity in the courtyard as presented on the plans today.
Second.
Okay, any further comments or questions? All right, I'll call the roll. Roger Dupree,
Yes.
Joshua Najin,
Yes.
Michael Marcotte,
No.
Shanna Cox,
Yes.
Christine Kittredge.
Yes.
Amy Smith,
Yes.
Lucy Bisson, yes. And that's 6-1 for this third waiver. And I'll entertain a motion for the application for the construction.
I'd love to make a motion.
Oh, good.
That the application submitted by JLM Enterprises LLC for the construction of a 6-story, 172-unit mixed-use structure on a new 28,223 square foot parcel at 3 Lowell Street meets all of the necessary criteria contained in the zoning and land use code, including but not limited to Article 13, Section 4, approval criteria, and Section 5, coordination with state subdivision law, and that development and subdivision approval be granted with the following conditions. Prior to signing of the drawings, amendments to the final drawing and application that are noted in Gorrill Palmer's response to comments 2 be addressed to the satisfaction of the staff. Prior to issuance of a building permit, the developer and city will finalize the design for off-site improvements, including utilities and street sidewalk pavements. Prior to the issuance of a building permit, proof of financial capacity be provided. Prior to the issuance of a building permit, the applicant shall provide a copy of the parking agreement, the parking garage showing at least 129 spaces available. Prior to the issuance of a building permit, capacity to serve for both water and sewer be received from Public Works. Prior to issuance of a certificate of occupancy, the applicant's engineer shall certify that all improvements have been completed in accordance with the approved plans, including but not limited to utilities, pavements and plantings, and building exterior materials.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Yes, Mike?
I'd just like to point out that, and I hope that the discussion in number 2 on utilities means underground utilities.
Yes.
Because that's my understanding, that's one of the things I like about the project.
Yeah.
Any opportunity we get in this community to put the overhead power lines underground, the better.
Yes, okay. In that case, I will call the roll. Roger Dupree,
Yes.
Joshua Najin,
Yes.
Michael Marcotte,
Yes.
Shanna Cox,
Yes.
Christine Kittredge.
Yes.
Amy Smith,
Yes.
Lucy Bisson, yes. Okay, 7-0. All right, guys.
Thank you so
Good
much.
luck.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Hurry, we need housing.
Yes, yes.
Done,
Yeah.
gentlemen.
When can we go look at these apartments?
I'll bring the ribbon.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Gentlemen, if you guys want to chit-chat, would you please chit-chat in the hallway?
Or you can stay for the riveting rest of our agenda,
Yes.
which we're about to go through.
Go through, you know. Yes.
Is there an opportunity for further comment about the motion that we just passed?
Other business. Yeah, you can, well, I mean, if you want to talk about it right now, go ahead.
I can wait until other business.
I have something as well.
Yeah, so let's do other business, and do you guys want to start with with what you want instead, and then we can move these
I can
things out?
wait. It's
Okay.
fine. We can just go down the agenda.
All right, so other business, update from Public Works on planning-related initiatives. Concept of the ribbon path design for Simard-Payne Park and the transportation improvement studies. Ms. Norton.
Okay. So Mary Ann Brenchek is joining us very soon. She was at the library checking out books about 3 minutes ago.
Okay.
So she'll be right with us.
Well, do you want us to go to
you
the
want-
next one?
We could do that, or we could take just a minute or two.
Okay, well,
stretch
why don't we
break.
go to we'll take it for, do you want, sure, let's take
Just
a
take a
couple of
minute.
minute break then, in that case. That'll work out well. No problem. I'm usually the one that needs the break. Oh, good grief.
No, I mean, I wonder from like a perspective, it would make sense.
I have questions. Questions about that.
Oh, sure.
No, that's like what we'll do here today, so.
Yeah, that's like a 40 minute now.
I have a bone to pick with you.
Yeah, because we're talking multiple units, like,
For the senior college.
Yeah, but that's okay, we're taking a break.
yeah, that all worked out.
Email box.
I was at the library, so I'm close, I'm like, let me check out my book.
Get some good
I
books.
signed up. I
signed up.
penned a response with all the information for it to be given to you. I did ask for some rate
Pretty
studies.
good. How are you?
Oh my
But I
God,
didn't-
Fragile
you know,
today
I
had a really
did-
serious accident with one of our employees.
Because that is
He was just trying to undo a gate valve, and the pressure
I mean,
backed up on him.
answering
All right.
Guy's in emergency down in Portland right now,
when I
so
had my business.
keep him in your prayers. That's how we started, 8:05 this morning.
So I did.
And just doing a routine
Be
complaint.
a member.
There's no big construction,
And then I heard.
nothing we could have done different, it's just,
What's her name?
Would you have sent it?
it's pressurized.
No, it's LA Senior College.
Very challenging.
So yeah, so that was a tough way to start the week, but doing it at least
Now, I'm just
stable.
saying that, I said, well, I'm gonna see
if the
her.
building's still set tax on this.
I understand that.
Everybody, yeah, I know Alex, I don't know if I know
No, but it
Michael.
doesn't even say.
Roger, I don't know if we've met before. I guess probably in this realm, but I'm like, I don't really know, I know this person.
That's just okay. Yeah, but I know that, you have to stay on top of this because that's, it's the look of your organization.
What's the museum in LA?
Because I did
They
hear
don't
from
exist anymore.
Dumley. Last name. Yes, so, she called me. So that's fine.
Yeah, I clearly did.
She responded right away. Chatted a couple of times.
Hello.
Haven't been awake since
And I'll make sure you get the actual response. Required, which is why it's extra.
I mean, that's why they put those cards.
Sounds good, sounds good.
Good books? Did you get good books from the library?
I did, and they're mindless, Nora Roberts. I did get Money's End, which is coming from Bangor, which is
Hey,
kind of a big book.
I mean, if I'm
But
gonna
mostly
read,
it's mindless.
of course,
relaxation.
Jody Robb and Nora Roberts and,
Danielle Steele.
Vern
Almost like
Michael.
Hallmark movies is, usually a good ending.
Yeah, it's good for the spirit. Okay, so everybody's here. All right, so we're back on the record, and so we are discussing, you're supposed to give us an update on the ribbon path and the transportation improvement studies.
Excellent. So let's start with a pretty picture, right? So we've been working a long time on this ribbon path extension.
Oh, you might want to introduce
Oh, sorry.
yourself.
Mary Ann Brencheck, Public Works Director, and I
Thank
really
you.
don't know everyone up here either. So if
We have
people could
nameplates.
introduce themselves, I know
Yeah, we
almost
all have-
every other one.
All right. Okay, go ahead. Oh, do you want us to introduce
Yeah,
ourselves?
would you? Because I don't know any, I
okay.
don't know if
Well,
you're a
we'll start with
resident or
Alex.
business owner.
Sure. Well, we've already met, but Alex Pine, planning board member and bicycle advocate tonight, I guess, given my comments, but we'll keep adding to the pile here.
Okay.
Lee Albert, planning board member as well. I live out on Dyer Road.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, nice to see you.
Smith, planning board member, Lewiston resident, downtown.
Christine Kittredge, Planning Board Member.
Lucy Bisson, you know me, Chair of the Planning Board.
I'm Shanna Cox, and I'm the vice chair of the planning board.
Mike Marcotte, lifelong resident of Ward 7.
Joshua Najin, planning board member and unofficial sexton of the Grand Army at the Republic Cemetery.
Roger Dupre, planning board member.
Excellent, awesome, thanks. Thank you, nice to meet you all. I wanted to come in just because we want to get this path built. And we've been designing this and putting it on hold for the master plan, but the master plan's done. And we've tried to integrate things in there that we could, but things like the pavilion is kind of the new one for the new Capitol. So the area that we have in there is able to have a stage that could pull up in on the back of a tractor trailer, or it could be a temporary setup, like an erector set almost, or it could be a small setting, a small stage that you set there. So we tried to create the space for the growth, and also, as you know, the steps going down to the canal. So when we took this, we said, let's be a little bit broader than just the path to the walking trail, which is the pedestrian bridge, and look at how are these other pieces going to integrate into a nice entrance coming in. We are not looking at, cars crossing each other. Very tight area there at the end of this beautiful pedestrian bridge that we had renovated. And then to also look at connections to the main mill and to the PAMCO building in the future. So we were lucky to get the road construction as an earmark project with discretionary spending with, I think it was Golden's funding, and then Susan Collins' funding is for the steps, the pavilion, and another pedestrian bridge to come off Oxford Street and cross right over by the Red Shop. So that's pending still. It's about $4.5 million. So we're going to see those projects in the LCIP, but we're going to put that note on them and keep them separate. So when we design this, we really want to come right up to pushing that parking out, putting your curbing on, and keeping the road gravel, because we have funding for that. Okay, so when we look at this, think about it in person, where the pedestrian lights are, is where we'll be pushing it back, because anybody who's gone in there knows you can't back out, right? So we need to widen that up. We'll need to put utilities in the road. So in the interim, we thought, don't wait another whole year to do this path, because there's only a short window of time of when we can do it, right? We know all the events we have going on, right? So we really want to be building this next fall. And so the road will end up staying gravel, and we'll have the curbing that goes along the parking, and the sidewalk along the parking spaces, and the trails, and the stone dust areas. And the intent that they had for that lawn area off to the left is where the races have come in off the pedestrian bridge, that you'd be able to sit on those bankings to be able to, kind of be the finish line. But it also will border some of the noise. When we looked at, how to best position that pavilion, if we're going to have any kind of entertainment, what's the best for, screening what goes over to Auburn, what goes to the residential area in Lewiston, and kind of just shoots down towards the bridge, really. So that will help with a little bit of that sound, but doesn't take away from the big balloon festival and, all the other festivals that we have, the River Fest, of course. But just all of that is the circulation of vehicles moving around. So when we got to that little bump out in the end, and we've had lots of different designs on that, we really see that more as a brick patio that will be open sometimes when you need to circulate vehicles through, but could also be closed halfway down, so that you could have food trucks there, pedestrians only, and have that flexibility of it not being a big sea of pavement. I mean, that's what we don't want. So we just got the estimates in on this and really feel like we've got a good design, a good budget. The 2 rain garden areas was really an attempt to look at treating the water before it gets to the river. So we're right there, we're right on this, beautiful, clean river. How do you do that, without just sending a pipe of drainage out there? So I think the landscape architect's view shed did a great job with kind of looking at how we would integrate that into some planting areas, and then it gets filtered, and then it goes out. So we like those parts. The entrance sign, again, to be developed, but we do want to move the Simard-Payne monument to the front of the park. And just, those little details will get done as we design it, because this is still just concept. This isn't even 30% design. It's still concept. But so that's why it's got time to make some changes or some tweaks. If you see something that's missing, I mean, we haven't got the details like bike racks or things like that. But it will have lighting. The lighting that we have there, we're intending to just turn it around, and then it will be that sidewalk lighting along the parking. And then the area in the middle is going to be mountable curbing. So for events coming into that stone dust area or starting to make the loop around, sorry, I'm French, is that those, which is perfectly okay in Lewiston, Maine. But you can still drive up, but you're not, coming to a really tight point, watching out for that hydrant that's right there, or even the new entrance, that we want to make there. If that's going to be an art piece or something that's, decorative, we want to keep our vehicles away from it.
Right.
So I think that, when you look at this drawing, we will build that path right to the edge of the paper. So you can see when you go down along the canal right now, it's very tight. You can barely get a vehicle in there, and then the food trucks are set up. We got to start to look at setting that up better. We're looking at our electrical next year, so all those electrical boxes, it was put in for one event, so they privately put in the electrical for all the food trucks, and we need to do it better. We did a little bit of that where we had to pump out all the lines to put the electrical on for an event, first event this year. And we're like, what is that set up like that for? So we do have some of those electrical. We have some things that are good in place, but mostly for event planning. And I think, that path could get wider. Maybe we move the path to the other side of the trees because we will have the canal touch of water pieces. So we thought, let's get it started and design right past the first set of stairs, and then, start to look at the other side of the path. And there isn't a path on the top of the hill yet, but there should be. That's an informal trail. It doesn't really affect any of the events. Like I said, the Balloon Festival needs the most flat space for the events that we do. So I don't think a path on the top of that hill is going to hurt that either. We've kind of spoken with all the event organizers and kind of integrated pieces into here. So that's kind of where we're at, and just seeing if there's anything that you see missing or have a question about. Love to hear
I
it.
have a question.
Yeah.
There's a turnaround plaza. What in the world is Woonorf?
A Woonorf? I don't know
What
if I'm
is
saying that
that?
right. So a Woonorf is a patio that could be used for vehicles, for emergency purposes, or for when you wanted to, but it's also a sitting spot. So there might be benches
so it's
around
not
that.
somebody's name, or
No,
this is
it's
not
a
going to be
design.
the
It's
name
named
of the
after that
plaza.
person who designed it.
Okay.
Okay, similar.
I just
yeah?
wondered.
No, it's
Okay.
similar, looking for that in a couple other areas.
I just wondered, it
Yeah.
didn't seem to fit
think
in
it's-
with Lewiston, Maine, that it would be Woonorf.
Woonorf, yeah.
And it could, because we have some unusual named people, and
Yeah.
anyways, okay.
So a bus and a
Here's
fire
my
truck, a bus and a fire truck could turn around at the end of that.
Okay.
That's exactly what I thought it was some business
No.
sponsor
Yeah.
for that
Who
area.
the heck is this?
So, looking at the diagram, I'm having a hard time picturing what it looked like in real person. So I take it that pretty much that whole area that comes off the pedestrian bridge is the path all the way to the bridge right now?
Correct, yeah.
Okay, so it's not just the pathway, it's some of the green space would be new
Right,
to the area?
absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
We're not sure if that many trees can fit in there, but we want to get that feel for it.
And you mentioned the noise. I don't think you're going to stop the noise that comes up over Bartlett Street Hill by Shaw's, because I don't think there's any kind of buffering that could stop that. It kind of, I guess it rises and then floats over on the jet stream.
Well, and that's what you manage by time, you know, what time you end an event.
And there'll still be soccer space
Yeah.
in the event lawn.
Absolutely.
And I think Dave remembers this because it was a rare moment where I asked to spend more money than what was being pitched. When we did the pedestrian bridge,
Oh my God.
I wanted, it was going to be pine board or something, and I wanted the Brazilian wood option so that it would last. And I hope that that's what would be used on a second pedestrian bridge if that ever happens.
Yeah, that's good, good to know.
Maybe somebody should assess when that first pedestrian bridge was put down. It might have been '09,
Yeah.
and how it's holding up.
Looks great.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really has held up well.
I'm down there very rarely, once a year maybe.
Yeah. Alex?
So I recall that I think we requested having this update in terms of how it interfaces with some of the planned projects. I think that was the impetus of this. So am I remembering correctly? Okay, and I just wanted to remind the whole board about that, just so when we're looking at the list of all the addresses and things, sort of start to think about how we're developing those areas. Something with this plan, you know, really appreciate that like we're starting to work on this and create a new space there. What I wonder about, you know, I have sort of two levels of interaction that I have with Simard-Payne right now, is either as someone going through it or as someone going there for an event or planning an event. And this seems really well sculpted for someone having an event there, but going through it, I wonder, you know, because we're gonna have new pathways coming into the park. We have this sort of new, you know, longer interface between parked areas and the park. And, you know, most of the time when I'm traveling through there, it's on bicycle. And right now, you know, it's a very small path. There's a lot of sort of pedestrian, bicycle, like, you know, it all just sort of gets stuck together. And I'm wondering, yeah, how we're going to address that with people coming out of their cars. You know, that's one entrance into the park, coming out of the parking area. It's not defined, you know, it's very linear, versus the more structured entrances that are going to be used by people on foot and people on bicycle. You know, it seems like there could be a lot of harmony, you know, for the people using the bike ped entrance, but eventually that's going to clash with the folks coming in from their cars. Pedestrians, not such a big deal. You're moving slow enough that you can just move around people. But that's something I wonder about, is how we can, you know, maintain sort of the throughput to the pedestrian bridge and open up sort of the throughput to the new pathways with the design. I also really like the fact that that plaza won't be open all the time. That, when I first saw it, I was like, oh, I hope that's not a, you know, full-time turnaround. So it's great to hear that.
Okay. Josh?
Just a few things to think about when we're thinking about Simard-Payne in general. One of them is just like water access. I just think it's something that's kind of important, especially for smaller events, having some access to be able
To the river or to the canals?
to like actual like water.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Like city water.
We have
Yeah.
that in a different plan, but
Okay,
yes,
perfect.
water fountain.
And
Drinking
then-
is what you're talking about, right? A drinking
Yeah,
fountain.
exactly. I like the fact that the trails are not too meandery. That's like a thing that like I cannot stand when like something's put in for like the purposes of like meandering a quarter of a mile. So I like the flow of it. That's nice. And I just have a couple of questions about like, and it's not in this plan because it's like off the page, but like we have that a large OC space behind the red shed, and I don't know if that comes into this in any way, shape, or form, and then also dock access. How does that, like thinking about where the OC space and the red shed is, like is this the point that we start to think about directing traffic to use the dock for boats to be parking in that area?
Josh, will you say what OC is?
It's the discharge containers.
What's the term? OC?
It's the
Overflow.
Yeah.
Catchment.
Overflow
Yes, I think
catchment. Thank you.
CSO tank is what we're building over at Lobka too.
Yeah,
One
so
underground.
ultimately, you know, just thinking about, because right now, the way it is for an event that when we're featuring the riverfront with boats, we come through Simard-Payne the long way to the dock, and it's closer the other way. So it's just something to think about. I don't
Wouldn't
know.
that be when they're building the new footbridge at the other end next to the red shot?
That'll be, if you're coming
That
down
will-
from the parking garage, you'll be able to.
It'll
race
give
to
you
the-
a direct shot to the boat launches and stuff, the piers.
That's perfect.
I think that's probably,
We're looking at a restroom in that area by the fitness center as well, not to
Okay.
be
Oh,
in the
good.
park, but close to the park, and that's kind of a review we did in
Yep.
Portland, is you want them to be accessible to areas, but not like in the area,
right,
so close by.
good.
So we
Good,
have
good,
that
good, good.
coming as a new capital project.
I can just say that, and I think Amy can back this up, carrying any type of large watercraft across that field is not awesome.
Yeah.
So,
No, I'm
We have a new
sure,
little
and I think,
drop-off spot.
I think that way would be, when they have the new pedestrian bridge, you'll be able to it'll be more of a straight shot kind of thing, I think.
The
Well, I mean, it
parking,
won't
the
do it.
parking behind Hampton Inn is in an agreement with Hampton Inn that has priority over that parking. We have some, and so that'll get clarified as we pave the rest of that parking lot. But it really is in partnership with Hampton Inn, so we're not directing people to park there for events because of that reason. And they're expanding, we want that, so be
Fantastic.
able to, coordinate with them there.
Lee?
Oh, I just wanted to say, if anybody hasn't been down to the park lately, where the dock connects to Simard-Payne has been regraded with a really nice ramp to connect to the dock, and you could even roll boats down like on a hand cart. And then the ground adjacent to it, it's been leveled and cleared. It looks great. So sort of in anticipation, I'd say sort of the groundwork has been laid for really activating that corner of the park. And I would love, maybe in the spring, to walk the park, like have everybody go and see it and talk about
Sure.
what we're thinking about, because between this and the improvements that have already been made, it's just really exciting stuff.
Super, super. Lee?
Sure. I just had a question, Mary Ann. You mentioned earlier that there's 4.5 million of funding that's
But Susan-
pending.
Yeah, Susan Collins has requested projects.
Sure.
And those haven't been approved yet. We know we got the street, which was $1 million or a little over $1
Okay,
million.
that was $1 million. yeah.
So it was two different projects that we put in. We asked for more.
Yeah.
But it came down to the 4 something.
Sure.
So yeah, we're very positive.
Absolutely. No,
We're
that's
hoping-
phenomenal.
I think they find out in January
Okay.
what's been approved and what hasn't with all the discretionary spending.
Obviously, I know that's
But it's
different.
great ribbon cutting projects.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's-
absolutely.
They want, so.
Absolutely.
Thank you for the
Okay.
timing.
Yeah.
Yes, Alex?
Last little comment. So, so thinking about this more, if there's a way, I like how it's all integrating with the park space. I think it would be really interesting to see some thought put into how do we get all of these pathways that are coming together. So we have the Auburn River Walk coming over the river, sort of the two new stubs of what's going to connect to the Lewiston River Walk eventually, how those can all join together. Because, right now they sort of join together in a plaza space that's also park space, and I think that's maybe going to create some tension that's just like unwanted. And also doesn't give the sense of unity of all these riverfront pathways being a network. Rather, it's like, oh, there's a little trail that sort of plops over this way and a little trail that plops over that way. So thinking about how we can tie that all together.
We talked about
in-
wayfinding signs as well.
Yeah, so wayfinding is definitely important,
Yeah.
but I think having design that tells you where to go rather than a sign that tells you where to go. So it's very clear that as you come from the path that's coming up from the south past Main Mill, that naturally flows into the path that's existing in the park that runs by the boat launch and runs up to the exercise area, and likewise,
Sure.
sort of gets you to go over the bridge too. So something to think about.
Right?
I
Jen?
hear you.
Did Roger have his hand up earlier? Because I've been waiting for Roger.
No, Mary Ann answered it.
Okay.
I was concerned about the laboratory facilities.
Okay. So I love it, and I love that you're seeking our input, and it's really challenging for me, given the way I've used the park for events, to be able to give full input without seeing the other half of the park.
Yeah.
So with complete faith, I'm still going to offer some thoughts based on that, which I think mirrors a lot of what Alex is saying, and I think is important. There are 2 times a year where that park gets significant pedestrian and bike use, and at least at one of those same times, there's also automobile use.
Yeah.
And the interaction of those 3 use types is something that we were running an event in the park with boats that were getting dropped off and using the loop that comes up through Memorial on yours. while the Trek Across Main was coming through the downtown and coming across the pedestrian bridge into the park near our stage where a kickball tournament was also happening. And tension is like a nice word for what it felt like that day. And I was just in New York City, and part of there was a little interesting kind of pocket park that had a bike pathway that intersected at various points and sometimes even followed along with a pedestrian pathway, but they were not the same. And the bollards and paint, there was a number of design choices that were used to indicate, and I am a please don't fall off when you take the corner bike rider. It is what it is. And people who are using bikes for the Dempsey Challenge, for the Trek Across Main, are zipping through there at 30 miles an hour. And that's a really different experience than you taking your kids with their training wheels and going and flying a kite at Simard-Payne. And we could increase the scale and economic activity from designing for the intentional mixed pedestrian uses like that. And so there's two areas of activity that are just flags for me in this particular setup. There's a ton going on in your turnaround. And I think that's lovely. There's a lot that I love about this, but the ability for an automobile path to circle and really minimize the number of times that that automobile path intersects with a pedestrian or a bike path, and that those intersections have like a crossroad, right? Like it's not just signage, but the design actually requires somebody from some direction to stop or yield, right? And that I'm just concerned that, and I can't picture a Lunar really well, and so maybe this will do it, but the notion that there's a lot of activity, that it's circling, and that it intersects and that it's not separated, I do think that there's got to be some design component that actually doesn't design for all of the uses to come to one spot to connect. Whether there's a pedestrian path that cuts up and over the lawn and takes the pedestrians out of the bike and automobile intersection. I just think that one section could probably have some opportunity to, and I would say likewise, that linear spot that Alex was referring to, and this is like in implementation, so you could already have this in your mind, but along there, that straight shot is where bikes are being designed to go, and they're shooting from the railroad bridge over to the pedestrian bridge, fast, straight, I'm on a race timing, and that is separate from you and your dog and your 3-year-old binding up someone's wheels, and that it's physically separate. It's not just a really wide path that can accommodate both, because the uses don't accommodate each other. It's not about depth.
No, I think that one thing I wrote too is maybe moving that roundabout back a little bit so that you have more room there.
Yeah.
You lose parking, which is something sort of needed for each event as well.
Yeah.
So kind of that's, I think we'll get in the details, and I hear what you're saying. I think some delineators or other pieces like that could be helpful too.
Could you move it into your lawn hill and not
Yes.
back against
Yeah,
the
yeah.
parking?
Right, no,
but
that's what I
into
mean
your-
this way.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
it still needs to have that same radius.
Oh, sure. Yeah, Josh?
So yeah, just to echo what Shanna's saying, buffered bike lane, I think definitely would be highly suggested, especially in the congestion space. But also, just thinking about, let's say, I don't know, Garth Brooks is playing, right? Really? Do we still have the capability to use to access any of these spaces as actual pedestrian spaces if there's a large event that's happening down here? And that's just something to think about, because ultimately, like, the pedestrian infrastructure should remain, like, even if there is like a paid event, for instance, you know. I think about the way that, I mean, Bangor has a lot of space around its waterfront, obviously, but there is, you know, they didn't impede the walking section by the waterfront venue, and it's just one of those things that, you know, think about, because people do use the space in order to get home and get to work and stuff.
Yeah. Shanna?
Assuming that this is what it looks like off the page, I love that there is a pedestrian path that cuts across the top table of that green space. I would just say, as an event organizer, there must be some kind of design element. I think the path is a huge, really important first step that indicates where the top of the stairs are that lead down. You can't see them. You essentially have to be like, see those little scrubby bushes over there? Trust me, there's stairs. And so like, what does it look like for the design of this pathway from both directions?
Lighting or something.
Yeah, something that indicates that this is a transitional area, because if you're a pedestrian coming from the Hampton parking lot, you either go all the way up by the Red Shop and all the way around, or you go all the way down into the woods, which is less in the open. And those are your two options. And there is no kind of somewhat straight shot across that field that like skirts it. And so I love that that's what this path is indicating. I just love to see it be completed thoughtfully. And I don't know if, like, don't allow it to be automotive. Like that outside edge one is enough for cars and gets you the access to the water.
It's 8 feet wide,
But
so.
yeah, but like the width and the material construction should not accommodate anything more than a small golf cart on your upper path, so that you're already by design restricting automobile use to certain areas of the park.
Yeah, for safety reasons, absolutely. Sounds good. Alex?
Sorry. Yeah,
Not
again,
sorry.
Thinking about this even a little bit more, like I think this is actually sort of the beginning of doing something really wonderful for Simard-Payne Park, and then the fact that it's kind of just too big as a singular space, and what this is really starting to do is divide up the riverfront space from the big flat green space, from the canal space, from the space that's going to be oriented towards the museum, and I think that's really powerful. And going off of what Shanna said, like making the pathways, making these, non four-wheeled vehicle transportation networks, because that's really what we're building, making those pass through the park in a way that doesn't get in the way of the other uses, while still recognizing that, at the end of the day, keeping cars separate is probably going to be the first priority, then keeping cyclists separate, and then having space for everyone else because of how we can get those interactions. But yeah, I think exploring how to get pathways that run around the plaza at the end, the turnaround plaza, so that there are pathways in the sense of, directions that people can go that don't make them interact with this space. Because I think that plaza space is really great, but it seems like it's sort of like it's either hangout space, or if we have a tractor trailer, we can turn it around there, right? And like those are sort of its two things. Where if we make it, it's also an intersection for all these bike paths and walking paths, that's where things are going to get too complex. And so giving people the ability to just sort of skirt around it, I think is going to be really wonderful. You can also sort of just guess, like, people are going to cut across here, right? So thinking about, all the potential desire pathways, and I think I can underscore that, like, Shanna, you're bringing up, people are going to zip along here on their bike. I think that's actually really bad because you have people coming out of their car and they're going to have poor visibility. You have someone going fast who also has poor visibility. I think that's going to cause a lot of negative interactions.
Good fencing along the parking lot that limits the pedestrian access to one or two points that crosses over that linear space.
Yeah, so like turning this, defining an entranceway here. I think that's what I was trying to get at earlier.
Right.
We have defined entrances everywhere else, but not for the car entrance. And I also wonder too, if you have people going quickly on bicycle and they just want to pass through, maybe it does make more sense to slow the cars down so it's safe for those cyclists to be in that same realm and actually direct them over there so that they're not zipping through the park.
Sure.
So I'm sure the Dutch have figured it out. I'm sure you're looking at all the wonderful design manuals that they've published out of Copenhagen, so I'll let you do that.
Josh?
And I would just throw out, just when you talk about those stairs in a way to kind of delineate them. Lighting's a good idea, obviously. A pagoda would probably work really well, or like some type of trellis. Just something you can spot from a distance. And say,
Right. That's where they are.
Yeah,
Sure,
exactly.
sure. Okay. All right, that sounds good. It's got some really good promise. I'm looking forward to it. Okay, so are you going to do the transportation improvements
I am,
too?
and just one last comment for the other thing, we're also including in that is an operations manual, how you use our park.
Oh, okay.
So that'll be key to whatever, locations for the toilets, either go here or here, or
Good.
So that we're given direction of how we want it to be used.
Okay.
And I think that's been not there.
No, and I think
Yeah.
good signage, especially
I know,
if you're
part
going
of
to
it. If you
have.
have events, you'll be part of that, but.
No, and especially if you're going to have bathrooms and stuff, you
Yeah.
really have to have the directionals, so that people know
Yeah.
that, the bathrooms are there and, that's there, or, don't use this for a bike, but don't use it for your 3-year-old and your dog,
Yeah.
Yeah, so, super, okay,
Okay, awesome.
thank you.
So
All
the
right.
transportation studies aren't as exciting, but they're important, because what they
Absolutely.
do is they set us up for future funding. And my goal with our LCIP is to use it to leverage grant funds.
Sure.
And, we've done that with a lot of pedestrian projects and a lot of transportation projects, but, there's more to be had for that. We really just want to be able to do the match monies on it, right?
Yep.
So the first one is the Safe Streets for All, and that project started with looking at the ramps over by the Veterans Bridge and looking at the point that Veterans Bridge isn't safe to cross for bikes and pedestrians. And so on both sides, Lewiston and Auburn, that's where that study started. And when we got to the funding for that type of a project, it needed to look at citywide, and it needed to look at 0 deaths. So when we kick this up again, there'll be a resolution that this is our goal for the city, and
Oh, good.
this will set us up for all federal and state grants. Anything to do with safety will be, you have to have this plan done first.
Okay.
So it's a lot of things that, one of the things that we're trying to make sure that it doesn't miss is those places that people are too afraid to go. So that's why there isn't any death, there isn't accident data, which is the dilemma with traffic signal warrants as well. You have to have deaths for it to be warranted, which is crazy, right?
Yeah.
Right? So I think when we look at the ramped areas, there may or may not be accident data there, but we wanted to study that. So we put a third component in there to the areas that don't fall through the cracks.
Good.
But I think it will be very interactive with the police department and just looking at what are the causes, and it's not just inattention, that's a big one. So we got a big educational component with that. But just what are some of the other pieces? Like, for example, Chestnut in Canal got hit again. It's had about 5 accidents there in the last 3 years. Just put up a new mast arm, we put it back away from the intersection, we put the ped pole closer. It's rules against putting bollards out there because those are deadly objects for traffic. And it got brand new, it's only been up a week, got hit again. And so looking at bringing that down to 1 lane is part of the Riverfront Master Plan update. This study can bring that to a 30% design. So the way the state is doing their funding now is mixing all their funding. So there's big projects, the $30 million projects. There's village funding, which lets you do lighting and seating. There's, match money funding, that we do 50-50. So they're blending all of them now. So we're just given a project, working side by side with DOT, and let them figure out which funding works the best. So that they can look at where their federal dollars are going, where their state dollars are going, what meets their goals. So it's really integrate that all of these are being done with DOT.
Good.
Originally, we thought that was just their desire to control all the money. So we've got a better understanding that they really are partnering with us. And that came, right from the director and the transportation leader. So we like that. And so what sets this one apart differently, it's a goal of 0 deaths. It'll be looking at all accident locations with deaths and high injury, and then that third category, which would be miscellaneous. And so we'll be looking for, some people to be on that committee with us. We'll have lots of public process with that. It's anticipated to be at least a year long.
Good.
And that's the closest one to getting started. So we've got a consultant. We're doing our kickoff meetings with the police department and the consultants for both cities working together.
Great. Shanna?
Is that already underway? You're mentioning the time frame and start times in number 2 and 3, but not in number 1, and there's a couple of areas that are likely to be studied in each of these 3?
Yes, there is some crossover.
Yeah, and so how are the timelines supporting or
So
holding that
the
back?
safety is first, and the PPI is right on its back. It'll be right done at the same time. It'll be a year to 18 months is the study time period. But one is going to be focused on citywide. So there might be some locations, like for example, on Sabata Street. Sabata Street, we already have some pedestrian crossings that were funded with heads-up money. But we're looking at that with safe streets, because we know there was pedestrian deaths on that street. And we're also looking at it for the planning partnership, which looks at the whole corridor. And maybe it's a roundabout at Main Street, or whatever that is, but it's the 20-year plan. So that'll get looked at in those two studies. But one has a particular focus and the other has a particular focus, a bigger picture. This one's very detailed about safety. And because a part of that's education. And very integrated with the police department. Like, not only how do you design better so that it's safer, but what are some of the other ways to identify, understanding what those causes are. You know, because your accident reports are pretty black and white information. You can't go interview all these people, but you try to look for trends, you try to look for patterns. And there's experts that deal with accident recreation. So I feel like we're gonna get educated on what the police have been doing all along, and the police are gonna have input in how we're designing. So it's a great partnership that I feel is really deep within those two departments looking together.
Good.
And so we're excited to have, you know, PD fully on board with all of this for us.
Okay. I have a question for
Sure.
you on number 3.
Do you want me to go through the general overview of all of them?
No, just Lisbon from Pleasant to Maple.
Yeah.
That doesn't work.
Why
I mean,
not?
Lisbon Street does not connect with with Pleasant Street.
Super 8.
It's super right by the intersection underneath the
Oh,
bridge.
that far up?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Chickadee is what's
Yeah,
my
yeah.
benchmark.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
I didn't want to put Chickadee, but.
I was thinking
Or
lower.
you guys are always saying the old building that used to be this. Try to just stick with the street names.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? I'm like, where was the old?
Okay.
I don't know where that was. So the third one is really an interstate study, and
Right.
that's access management. And that was money we were gonna give back, and we had to come up with projects. So both Lewiston and Auburn said, let's look at our throughways coming from the turnpike and how that comes into our community. So same thing on both sides of the bridge, you know, looking very different for Auburn than us, but we still have that transition to downtown. So that's why we took it all the way to Maple Street, because that gas station
Yep.
area drives me absolutely crazy, and I want to just start doing stuff. But we do need studies and also public input.
Okay. Yes, Josh.
I just wanted to mention, I know a lot of these roads are main DOT roads.
Yeah.
And so,
State.
you know, when you look at like the slip lane on Main and Lincoln, the slip lane on Main and Canal, the slip lane on Lisbon to East, right? And we're talking about 4 lanes and, 4 lanes plus an extra turn lane on the bridge, and then 5 lanes, because you have a turn lane in the middle, plus that slip lane. Like, is there any consideration for either limiting the amount of cars that can come to the intersection or pushing the pedestrian traffic in a way that like doesn't compete with the cars on the intersections, I guess is the question.
So looking at that in a couple different ways, because, you know, we got the water line going in, so looking at what happens with traffic there and closing off the slip lanes, and how fast does that back up into the other cities, both sides? So we'll have some experience with that this spring in this fall, but we're looking at the walkway going underneath the bridge being the priority, safest walkway for someone to cross at Main Street right at Lincoln. The level of surface of the traffic signals is getting looked at with pedestrians in mind. We have a consultant doing that now. So, you know, you might have noticed the synchronization being better, but then it's timing is the next thing. We kind of moved over to that Fowell and Sabatis, but Sabatis, Lincoln, those are our main arterials that they're looking at for signal coordination, as well as, you know, could be exclusive PEDs, you know?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, just thinking about, you know, how most of the lights work downtown, as somebody who is a pedestrian quite a bit, you know, there's one, the ADA access consideration, and then 2, like, how quickly you can get across the street. And honestly, you know, I would prefer that pedestrians don't compete with cars ever if there's some way to do that, but.
So I want to get that
These are
under
just big
first.
pinch points that I see, so.
We're also looking at Main Street getting paved year after next, okay? So that design has come out, there's been a couple public meetings on that. That's where we're looking at, you know, bricking a sidewalk, raising a sidewalk. All that'll get done with the ADA work. So that doesn't have to wait, but we still, you know, like I said, wanted to start tweaking it along the way.
Okay.
To what extent, if any, are you able to, in each of these planning processes, use pipeline development information and not just current use. And I'm going to call out specifically the project in the Farwell district that's going to add units and pulls the intersection from Farwell Street into Sabattis Street. That has been a point of contention relative to, as we understand it, signal issues that make everybody think there's already too much traffic in the neighborhood, which apparently that's not really the issue.
School times, yeah.
Right, and so as you're planning, to what extent, if any, are you able to use existing pipeline data
So we look at.
and growth
We
data?
look at projected growth, economic
Yeah.
development data. So we look at that not only for our utilities, but in transportation as well. For expanded roads, where we're looking at lane widths, where can we narrow that in? So we always look at what's the development potential in those areas. The PPI, which is number 2, we'll look at that a little bit closer, because that's the 20-year out.
Okay.
We'll look at the development around Lowell Street and all of that, and how does that cross over to Main Street? And we've got some ideas on that as well. So just trying to, like we said, we got the paving project coming first, is to do some improvements and continue to tweak it as we go with the bigger picture. So it might just, might be textured, it might be raised. But we might want a complete roundabout at Sabattis, who knows? You know what I mean? So there is things that will not hurt what we want to do in the future, but be able to kind of move it in a direction that keeps pushing it towards a little bit more equity
Right,
of use.
okay. Michael?
On number 3,
Sure.
spending my whole life along that corridor, all the way from Ruper's, all the way into, what used to be on the corner? There's Shabbat's, and there's another place. It was the food bank at one time, where the
see.
college used to be.
Yeah. Well,
But,
the public theater is right there.
Yeah, but VIP, my employer,
Yeah.
and the public theater. So, reading, narrowing things down to one lane sounds rather problematic. Now, the traffic would back up big time, especially since that's 196, and once you get to East Avenue, that's how you circumvent the community, because they never did the one out off of Alfredport Parkway, and that's what creates the traffic on Farwell Street. And I suggested to Dave after that meeting on the Farwell project, cul-de-sac at Farwell Street. That would prevent the use of it, wouldn't it? That would force them down to East Avenue and take a right to go to Main Street or over to Turner Street. But also, there's a consideration down at Maple Street, because Country Kitchens is still operating with big rigs. They need to be able to maneuver onto Park Street. So I believe that section had been widened, as has right next to the pawn shop. That street, Chestnut, has been widened so that, because it's a state route, so that semis can make that turn. So I'd be very concerned with narrowing any part of Lisbon Street. And another consideration is we'll be moving that fire station at some point in the near future.
The Lisbon Street.
The
fire
Lisbon
station.
Street. No, that's the next one.
That's
Main
like,
Street.
would be scheduled for 26 to be thinking of, to be planning it at that point.
'Cause I don't know if Main Street's being reconstructed now. Or,
I don't know, I haven't,
no, most of the planning work is done.
yeah, I went down that neighborhood the other
Main
day,
Street
and I
is-
didn't
is
even
being
think about it.
constructed. I mean, it's not being constructed yet, but the design is underway.
Yeah, the design.
Yeah, the design and
Paulson Way,
stuff,
the
yeah.
JD
Development
Lane.
review, I think, is done.
I think it's 24 is when it's scheduled to be
To be built.
built, yeah, I think so. I think it's in the 24 LCIP, isn't it?
Yes.
I don't remember off the top of my head,
Yes,
but
it
it's
is. I know.
like,
I can't believe you guys don't have
Designing
the whole
for it
thing
to be built.
memorized.
I know. So, okay, anybody else?
Yeah, all the
have-
traffic volumes, all of that will get looked at, projected
Sure.
economic growth will
Yeah.
get looked at.
Yeah, Alex?
One thing I'm wondering about with all these studies, it sounds like lane narrowing might be an option, or sort of, condensing streets. A significant amount of real estate is used up by these streets, and that will be open for development, hopefully. Is that something that the planning process is going to take into account? Like,
What could be developed?
for example, sort of the highway on-off ramp situation for Russell Street. If that was brought in and made more compact, like that opens up developable lots. Not that you'd necessarily want to be next to a highway off-ramp if you were a house, but, you know, that's something that could be used, you know, more productively than lawn that we have to pay to get mowed that doesn't really do much. Are we thinking about that when we're looking at street redesign in terms of where are places that we can open up developable lots? You know, looking at this regionally, like Portland's thinking about this with Franklin Street, which I'm sure you're familiar with.
Yeah, I was a traffic engineer in Portland. for
Yep,
10 years.
yep. And like, you know, that's a very dramatic case in that you
Yeah.
have like multiple city blocks that you could redevelop if they just brought the street down. Yeah, so are we thinking about that?
I think where it's, like I think of Lisbon Street, there isn't enough real estate there. I think you've got some good ideas by where the, you know, the ramps are. DOT designs have come back to being a little bit more reasonable than the big swings that they have. So I'm not sure there's a lot that can be gained there. I know Gendron has an empty lot that could get expanded possibly. I think the area in front of Lisbon Street where that gas station is, I'm thinking more trees and green space, then it would be enough room for development, but maybe not, because that gas station might not be a gas station all the time. And there's a very awkward little cut-through streets.
Yeah.
Like where it used to be a drive-through bank or something like that.
Yeah.
So that street could definitely open up some area there. So I think there's some opportunity.
Yeah, maybe I should reframe that, not opening up necessarily full developable lots, but
Yeah.
making, you know, what's a sort of small postage stamp lot, something more attractive for redevelopment, you know.
Yeah,
This can
more
hold a gas
amenities.
station now, but if we
Yeah,
get
right.
an extra 12 feet on every side of it,
Yeah.
that could be a really nice office building or an apartment building.
Right, right. I do have a question. You was talking about roundabouts,
Yes.
like at Farwell, Sabattis?
I was saying Sabattis in Maine.
Sabattis in Maine? Okay, all right.
I was just throwing that out there.
No, I'm just thinking, because I was thinking Farwell and Sabattis, that, you know, because the roundabouts take up a lot of real
They
estate.
do take up a lot of real estate in one design, so it depends what volume you're talking about.
Right,
So there's lots of ways to do smaller ones that have been done all over the state of Maine finally. It's taken
Right.
years, but
right, yeah.
it's the
Okay, all right,
the
I'm just
option, I
curious.
guess.
Josh?
Just when you mentioned roundabout right there, as a person who's locked into my neighborhood due to traffic patterns, two things that happened that are fantastic. One, when the Dunkin' Donuts went in, that actually, there was a street redesign there and it actually slowed traffic quite a bit. So now Whipple Street, which is a horrible street to drive on, but is a fairly good street to gain access to Main Street from. So that's one piece. But the second piece, especially depending on like what happens at like the Saxon project and what happens with Lowell Street, and considering all the pressure that is now right at that DHS piece, if we did have a roundabout there, you could maybe use Hammond as a two-way. Because it's only one way for like 100 feet. And as a matter of fact, when they repaved it, they didn't even realize it was a one-way and they painted
A
Too
line
wide.
down the middle?
line down
Too
the middle.
wide. I was all over them for that, too.
But the point being, like, that would be another access place to get out of the neighborhoods, especially considering the amount of development that's going to be happening in
The
that
housing
area.
units.
So-
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Signal.
I was just going to say, overall, one-way streets do make it very difficult to, one, make sure that traffic stays slow, because one way you got more width and you can just speed. But then two, for folks to get around, it's just more difficult. It makes the street grid more difficult to navigate.
Makes it more complicated.
Anything that we can do to reduce that, I think, would be really beneficial.
The second study will also look at one-way traffic coming into Lisbon Street and going out of Lisbon Street, the Ash, Pine, even Lisbon Street itself, to, you know, downtowns that have been redeveloped for two-way again.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we'll look at all of that. You know, I
It
think
was
it's the
two-way when I
timing.
grew up.
Right, the timing is right to look at it, whether we choose to do that or
Yeah,
how it
yeah.
floats out, but should
Sure.
get looked at again.
Yep, Shanna?
I just want to say thank you for coming, and
Yes.
can you please look at the direction of the benches in the Triangle Park at Webster and Pine?
Yes, do you think they should face in the park?
It's so weird that everyone would go to the park with their kids and then
Yeah,
turn their
I
back on
know.
them to watch traffic.
Yes, yes! That is a
And,
pet peeve of mine.
I don't know if it's just bolts and a turn or what, but
No, it isn't that easy, but, you know, the benches we took out of Dufresne Plaza?
Yeah.
they may be able to go back in over
That'd be
there.
great.
Which
Ah.
you can turn either way, they don't have backs
Every
on
time
them.
I see families from
That's
the.
a pet peeve of mine, too.
Well, they're in the apartment building directly across the street, and they bring camp chairs to the park
Yeah, it's
to
crazy.
not sit on the benches so they can watch their kids. That is bad design. That's bad design.
It is.
Okay, all right, well, thank you so much, and, you know, we'll look forward to what you guys come up with.
Awesome.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you very much, and enjoy your books. Okay, staff review of Shoreland Zoning applications.
Okay.
Yeah, you might want your jacket, it's a little chilly out there.
Be
Okay.
inappropriate. Can I ask if it's inappropriate? Can I ask a question?
Sure, nothing's inappropriate.
This is a lovely written memo, and I would love an abridged
Yes.
version of what you might present so that we can support your future movement to changing language and move forward with action today.
That sounds very reasonable.
Awesome.
Okay. So recently, we got a question which led staff to look at the Shoreland Zoning ordinance and realized that at some point in the past, when we had updated to new state language, we dropped off the the building official as the regulator of a certain element, and instead it has the planning board or their designee as language. So since the planning board has not designated anyone, and this was a question last week that we got from a resident, and we had this meeting coming up, staff thought, let's talk to the planning board and find out if you want them to put an application together to come to you, or whether you want to designate the building official to handle all the other shoreland zoning kind of determinations. So we can talk more if you want, but that's essentially the question before the planning board.
Personally, I think that's an onerous step to ask for them to do that. And so I think we should definitely designate the building official. Joshua?
I just have one question about the process. So if we have a designated official who handles the request, is there an appeals process, and how does it work? So basically, right now, it sounds like you'd bring it to planning board would approve, and then it would go to council or not go to council?
No. So essentially, the determination would either be made by the building official or the planning board, and if somebody appeals that, I believe it goes to Superior Court. For the planning board and for Board of Appeals for the building official. So actually, by making it building official, it makes it a simpler process for someone to appeal. They can appeal locally instead of it going higher up.
Michael?
Had a discussion with Dave earlier, and I have a feeling that this somehow segues with a recent appeals board last week I was going to attend, and just escaped my mind, because there was an individual looking to reconstruct and replace a building on a parcel out by No Name Pond, which I thought he should have gotten his variance. He did not. I'm not looking to delegate that authority. And I think in that particular case, the individual had to spend money to go to appeals and lost, as did the other appeal that night in downtown Lewiston on 44 Maple Street. Another one that could have been given a variance and get a little bit of infill in another housing unit. Both of those items could and should come back to the planning board to discuss what the variance was, and maybe we can change code that where they wouldn't have had to have gone to the appeals and lost. So I'm not looking to delegate at this point.
I just want to point out that the variances are something specifically that the appeals board handles. It's not something that the planning board handles.
Yeah, planning board does not have any.
If somebody was working with a building official to determine what the maximum, the extent that's practicable to move their building back would be, essentially it's an administrative appeal, it's not a variance. So it would go to the planning board, and basically the case would be that the person feels that the code officer didn't, look at the facts appropriately and come to the right decision. So it's a very different process of the Board of Appeals, or different decision that's being made. It's no different than if we made a determination that someone couldn't build a house on a lot because it was undersized. that determination by staff could go to the Board of Appeals. It was really a determination that staff made the wrong decision,
The
right?
point that I'm making is that maybe code needs to be adjusted so that there was no need to go to appeals for a variance. And the same with waivers, like we had a discussion tonight about. If we're always waiving certain conditions, maybe we should look at that condition and liberalize it a little bit so that there's less appeals, less people that are walking away with sour taste in their mouth because the project that they wanted to do was denied. And they had to spend money to do so.
Okay. All right, any further discussion? I'll entertain a motion. Please, somebody?
I'm happy to make one.
Sure, or action.
Nope, it's motion. I'd like to make a motion pursuant to the Zoning and Land Use Code, Article 12, Section 2, that in the matter of the reconstruction and replacement location of a non-conforming building, the city's building inspector is appointed as the planning board designee.
Do I have a second?
I would second that.
Okay. Any further discussion on the board? Roger Dupree?
Yes.
Joshua Najin?
Yes.
Michael Marcotte?
With emphasis, no.
Shanna Cox?
Yes.
Christine Kittredge?
Yes.
Amy Smith?
Yes.
Lucy Bisson, yes. So that's 6-1. And that's approved. Okay. Next item on other business, discussion on first floor activation for certain streets and corners.
Okay, so this is follow-up to the joint workshop that we had at the end of September. At that time, you'll recognize the first figure that's attached was something that we had discussed. And there was discussion about how would we, kind of to what extent would we regulate the first floor use so that we could try to have a more active space than residential living on the first floor in certain spaces. So what staff is asking for tonight is some guidance. We're hoping to come back on November 13th with a number of zoning and ordinance changes, this being one of them. This was ready for discussion, so we thought, why not bring it this evening and see if you're ready to talk about this. And so the discussion, the suggestion would be that for 100 feet along Canal Street and Lincoln Street, those corners would not have residential living space, so dwelling units on the first floor. And then for the full extent of Lisbon Street that you're seeing from Main Street to Adams, the same thing on the first floor, but not limited to the 100 feet, it would be the whole length. And then the cross streets that we would go 50 feet on that corner. And then as staff talked about it, we were looking at Main Street and discussing the area across from the hospital and kind of redevelopment there. And we felt that because there's a lot of potential activity happening in this area, new apartments like were discussed this evening going on in the Lowell Street area, but also the area right across from the hospital being a potentially 24-hour, very active space, that the first floor of any new buildings that might go in there, we'd really love to see not be entirely dwelling units on that first floor, but have some commercial component. So the discussion there, and I just picked this number, was to say that the second map that you see for that extent, that 50% of the first floor facing and I should have said facade facing the street, so not the back of the building, but just the facade facing the street, 50% of that would not be allowed to be dwelling units. So some of that's a little arbitrary, the numbers maybe that staff has suggested, but just want to feel out the board, whether we're heading in a direction that sounds good, what are some comments or suggestions you might want us to incorporate for next time.
Okay. Joshua?
I've got a lot of comments.
Sure.
So first and foremost, I appreciate what you're trying to do. I get it completely. I do think that one of the challenges that you'll run into overall when you look at asking people to develop in spaces that are either empty lots at the moment or redeveloped spaces that already exist is asking people to be commercial landlords is maybe a tough sell sometimes, and I think that like ultimately we can encourage things, but without like a strong economic development plan that indicates that we're going to incentivize businesses to occupy these spaces, I'm afraid that you'll see things like the TD Bank Center, which is actually the IRS building, which is just completely vacant on the first floor and locked up like Fort Knox. And we have a lot of empty storefronts right now on Lisbon Street as it is. And so I would just be really careful in the ways in which we move in this. Like I would think we should want to incentivize these spaces to be activated. I think that we want to encourage it, but I think that the development hopefully will come about in an organic way. And when I look at certain stretches of Lisbon Street, which are completely vacant, or I look at certain sections of the Main Street corridor, which are completely occupied by nonprofit services that are needs-based, where nobody is competing for that space as a retail space, it's a tough sell, I think, to mandate something. That's all. So that's just my thought on that.
I guess my question back for whether it's you or the board is, would you want to see people's living spaces on the first floor facing Lisbon Street or facing Main Street there? And that's really what we're talking about with how we've written it, is the dwelling units. The actual apartment wouldn't be street facing on the first floor for more than 50% of whatever the building facade is on Main Street or any of Lisbon. But it might be the gym, it might be the lobby, you know what I mean? So it isn't to say that there couldn't be a residential only use, but we're limiting how that first floor is broken up between dwelling units versus a common area.
I can hear that, but my thought behind that as well is, so I think about, like, we have a domestic violence shelter on Lisbon Street, right? And you cannot see into it, right? And there's a reason for it, because it's a domestic violence shelter. But if I don't know how comfortable I would be as a resident to just have people like walk by and look at me while I'm hanging out in my lobby. So, you know, it's just one of those things. Like, again, I think.
So your lobby?
Yeah, the lobby.
You're more comfortable with them looking at you in your living room?
I think that we're talking about the difference between having a transparent first floor and something that people can't see into. You know.
Well, yeah, but there has to be windows.
Are we talking about that?
Yeah.
We're not, okay.
Okay.
Anyways, okay, anybody else have any comments? I mean, because this is not an actionable item, this is just a discussion
Yeah,
item.
just feedback, right?
Okay, Michael,
Some feedback is more in agreement with, name's Shelley, right?
yes.
Shelley than Josh. I was going to say Kelly for some reason, I don't
Right, there you go.
But, I mean, no, we have a lot of buildings downtown that are underutilized, that, some of which are being turned into housing, such as the lofts and the Continental Mill and so on and so forth. And once more people move into the area, I don't think there'll be a need to actually build on a vacant lot and put a housing unit on the first floor. So whether it's commercial space or whether it's amenity space, I do like the idea of the restriction that was suggested in the agenda item. I'm still waiting for the Dominican block to have something happen. Years ago, when that was first being discussed, and an elevator and other ideas, it would have been a great place for a little area pub, but you really have to have people living in the area for that to be frequented with any frequency. The loss isn't enough. The TD Bank operations there is not enough. And of course, in the comp plan, we have a nice graphic that shows storefront commercial along Oxford Street, with the second and third floor potentially being residential. I think that should be the goal. And a topic that we kind of let slip away, some of this area would make great for TIF districts to encourage the kind of activity that we want developed. So that, because nobody really knows out there, and they don't want to take a risk on Lewiston. So we have to have a solid plan from the third floor in order to get things flowing here. And I do like this idea. I would support it if it came back to the board as such.
Okay, Lee?
Thank you for this, Shelley. So I'm just curious, in looking at the map in a really basic way, there's a couple of streets off of, well, Lisbon and Canal where the pink doesn't follow, and I'm just curious the reasoning behind that. So I think it's Canal, and if I have my streets, I'm sorry, Lisbon and Spruce?
Yeah, so I didn't actually amend the map. So this was the figure you saw in September. What David and I talked about was kind of, there were two ways to do this. One would be an overlay, which would actually be a map.
Yeah.
And what I'm proposing in this description is instead, there isn't a map, actually. The map is just kind of for your purposes tonight.
Got it.
But this is all written in words that would describe kind of those cross streets. And so, yeah, so we didn't actually, so you'll also see, yeah, like
'Cause then it was
cross
Pine
street only is
Yeah.
like that. And so it would kind of be all three legs. I don't, does
That's
that
helpful.
help?
I was just
Okay.
looking at it
Yeah.
for consistency,
I hear
thinking
you,
about
totally.
a potential user.
And we specifically
Coming in.
thought about that property too, because the police station's moving, the future of that's not known. That's a parking lot on Lisbon Street.
Yeah.
There's a better use than a parking lot on a corner lot on Lisbon Street. So
Right. Okay.
Sure, thank you.
Yeah, so I think for this discussion, I feel like we're talking about use, and really the motivation behind this is not so much use, but how it interacts with the streetscape, right? Like that's the whole idea here, is we feel that storefronts are more permeable, they're more friendly to people walking by, and that just will create a more pleasant place for people to exist, right? I think that's sort of the main reason we're looking at this. And so I guess I question using sort of a heavy-handed technique of saying no residential because residential is more likely to not be permeable, rather than maybe looking, I know the last time this came up, we talked a little bit about form-based approaches to addressing this, and I don't think we really have too much in the way of form-based stuff. But like, for example, just thinking of a random thing, over by on Lisbon Street, there's this one building sort of in between two vacant lots, no windows, has little arch doorways on it, painted red or whatever. Like,
Oh, it was a club.
it was, yeah. it was
The
some
top
club.
of the building burned years ago, and yes.
311 Lisbon Street.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, I could imagine, I don't know why someone would do this, but you could build a house on one of those lots, and if you have it set back far, and you have like a nice garden or yard up front, that provides that same permeability for someone walking down the street, that same visual appeal, without sort of the heavy-handedness of saying no residential right there. But I understand like why we're looking at it this way. Like this is the tool that we have at hand to deal with this, and I would just caution when we're thinking about it that, like Josh is saying, like there's a need for housing. I hope there's a happy medium that we can find where we can just sort of let the city grow organically as cities do, rather than prescribing exactly what's going to go where.
Okay. Shanna.
Just a clarifying question for you first, Shelley. I heard you talking about 50% use, but are you really talking about 50% of use of the bottom floor and limiting it by just the front facades use?
Exactly. So for all of these, I think
The language is as such, and there is
Yes,
no need
it's
to add
definitely the
50%.
facade. So it's not the back of the building, it's the portion of the building that faces, whether it's Lincoln Street, Canal Street, Lisbon
Yeah.
Street, or Main Street.
I offer that because I think you're doing yourself a disservice by calling it 50%, because that depends on the depth and the width and all of the things, and I don't think it's 50% by use or by square footage or by number of units. I think the way that you've got it written is really clear, right? That there is no living quarters front-facing these streets as described, whether it's the corner and it's both streets or the front street. So literally, somebody could have, I think of the art and ale window at Gritty's. You could have a small facade in the front that activates the space and still have 75% of your first floor used as residential space. And so if that is the case, let's be clear about it and not do yourself a disservice with the 50%, because I think that is what that's what you're intending, and that's what this does. So that would be one piece of feedback to see you be successful.
Can I ask a clarifying question? So I think the way I have it written right now, like on Lisbon Street, it's all of the facade facing the street, can't have the living space. For Main Street, it felt like a large stretch, and so for that, I had limited it to 50%. So there's kind of
50% of each property?
of whatever the building is. So it'd be kind of the I think, is it the building? It would be.
We have it right as no more than half the building frontage.
Yeah. So if I have a 200
No, that makes sense
lot
to me.
and a 100-foot building, 50 feet of the building can't be dwelling and 50 feet has to be activated space.
Yep.
Okay, that makes,
Yep.
that makes more sense.
To Alex's point, I actually don't agree with the premise that your comments were built on, which I think it's part of the goal that you mentioned, but I actually do think this is about use. And I think about that single-family homeowner in that infill lot being frustrated that there's a nightclub that goes in next door, or that there's a coffee shop that stays open late or gets up early. And we've seen issues around that use that prohibit further businesses or economic development, and that's why we have zoning, that's why we have patterns, and it is about use, not just, although I really also like side benefit, that it is about a scalable streetscape, and that it's at a pedestrian scale, and that it's encouraging activity and use in that space. Sorry, I can wait till you guys are done so that you can get the feedback you asked for.
Sorry.
Okay, so that for me it is both. And because it is both, and this is why I'm being crystal clear about it, if it is about both, then it can be about where the entrances are located. There's a number of ways that a developer or somebody doing a reno even can address that. It can be the art and ale window in the front that allows for 80% of the floor plan on the first floor to be residential use and still meet this, which is why I think, just be really clear about your language. But for me, it is about use too. And I fully support it. I would also say language alone, whether it's for us reviewing this or for somebody who's trying to buy or renovate a parcel in one of these areas, I actually think a map's really important. Just make it accurate.
Yeah.
And I think that
Makes things more clear.
It really, I think and it doesn't have to be like the design district overlay. It can be, see Appendix A or whatever. But for us to approve it, for city council if they're gonna see it. But even if I'm a developer coming in, I actually think okay, my building's 100 feet long on this cross street and only 50 feet of it, and that's clear to me. I think that it's a useful tool to do that which you want it to do.
Yeah, I agree with Shanna in terms of the map. I'm a relatively visual person, and it's a lot easier for me to look at a map or a drawing and see what your numbers are saying. I mean, you have to have the words too, but a map as an appendix, like Shanna says, see Exhibit A or whatever. But yeah, I think the map, but an accurate map. Joshua.
Just to state, understanding now that you're speaking about specifically only facades, that kind of changes some of my position. The situation is, so that's more of a design standard approach as opposed to dictating use.
Yeah.
And so, in that case, I'm less worked up about it.
Okay, all right.
The residences at Newbury?
Okay, Alex,
I'll be quick.
last
Yeah.
comment, please.
Yeah, no, I get it. Again, I still think that we are fundamentally talking about form. I understand what you're saying about zoning and making sure that we have uses in specific areas, but if you're allowing 80% or whatever percentage of that first floor to be residential, it just doesn't face the street. The concerns around noise, the concerns around, what the rest of the neighborhood is like, I think, you'll still have those problems, even if you have a rule like this. So again, I just would like to highlight that I think what we're really talking about is permeable, accessible feeling on the streetscape. And, in other cases, maybe use really does play into it, but if we're allowing a lot of housing on that first floor, I still see those problems cropping up. So I don't think it's necessarily a use thing.
Okay, let's see. Josh and Michael had something that they wanted to, and so I'll and Amy. So I'll pick Josh and we'll go down the line. How's that?
Sounds good. Just concerning the development project that we reviewed tonight, one of the pieces with Chapel Street Alley is I believe we still hold some property in fee right on the corner there. Is that correct? There's a small park there. So when we're thinking about, and I'm not saying, just give land away to people or anything, but when we're thinking about like this development and how it's going to work, like, I don't know if that's a space that we could consider as amenity space within that development, and then also like possibly even like, I think about like, storage is another piece. Like if I lived so close to the river and I couldn't keep again, I'm going to bring up the kayak, but if I couldn't keep my kayak in my, I'm not going to lug my kayak up to the 5th floor of an apartment. So just thinking about like how that whole area ties in together. And again, just to echo, like on that FERC relicensing piece, if there's any way we could get some guarantee that we could have access to the riverfront right there, that would be fantastic.
I'll just add quickly, I don't know that we're going to get river access there because that's part of the river that's actually blocked off to keep boats from actually going in there for safety purposes. So maybe they would be willing to amend that, but that's an area that's been blocked off there. One of the appeals for Levesque and this gentleman is the images that have been shown for the riverfront to provide that connectivity from Simard-Payne underneath the Veterans Bridge or Longley Bridge up to Island Point and up to this property and eventually through. So that's part of the appeal for these gentlemen is our interest in trying to activate that space there. So you're right on, Josh. I think there's been discussions about even trying to get easements from each other so we can provide that connectivity.
And when you think about like the plans for the Riverfront Island, when you were proposing, or not you were proposing, but in the Riverfront Island master plan, it was proposed that like you could go look at the KFC parking lot. Like that would probably be a good place to have like a public boat access, for instance. But
Okay. Michael?
I want to first touch on something that Josh brought up. So the discharge that goes back there behind the parking garage, because I think you said something about not being a good boat launch. No, because that water goes into the canal, correct? There are gates there to go into the canal.
I'm sorry, Mike, where am I now?
So
Back of the parking garage.
In back of the parking garage.
The PEX parking garage you're
Yes.
talking about?
Yeah.
Yep.
Storm.
And does stormwater go into the canal there? Is that what you're
Well,
asking?
the stormwater going into the canal there, and when the canals are gated off, like I believe they are right now, because you don't see much water at the bottom of the canal, any pollution that goes in there will collect at the bottom of that ponded area. Of course, it's got to, at some point, based on the height of the water, flow around the island and down the falls. But it's a basin back there.
So the area behind the PEX garage, there is a combined sewer overflow in that spot there. So in certain storm events, there will be sewage that potentially goes into the river there.
And it does go into the river. The gatehouse for the canal is actually further down. The gatehouse for the canal is almost in line with the front of the PEC building.
So that
Yeah,
discharge, I mean, we are trying to avoid that, obviously. I mean, that's why we have 1 million gallons plus down by the Hampton Inn of storage for storm events, and we have some others off of, I don't even know what the name of those roads are off South Avenue.
But solids will sink, and that is a basin there. Obviously, if it's gated off, it's going to go around through the falls, and I don't know if it's a CMP or whatever, that powerhouse that was built there. But I just wanted to point that out. The thing that I wanted to bring up was a letter of financial capacity. As of late, I've been noticing that it's been vacant from development reviews, and it's starting to create a pattern. And I'm not liking the fact that it's becoming a pattern, that it's a
Not a requirement?
Condition.
Not a condition?
Yeah, I'm concerned that it's becoming more and more frequently a condition as opposed to something that you actually see, such as in the Gorrill Palmer book, a section. Over the years, I've seen them come through as something that was standardly in the development review booklet. And now it's like, well, I don't need to do this because I can make it a condition and then just get staff approval later. Registering my displeasure with that.
Okay. Okay. Shanna, going down the line.
I'd like to gauge interest from the remainder of the board to request staff to revisit our language regarding hoop houses and equipment and have them in line with state guidance.
What houses?
Hoop houses?
Oh, hoop houses, sorry, yeah.
The exchange from earlier, just if you need a formal request to activate that, we've got a large local food movement. There's a lot of agriculture land. We spend a lot of time thinking about how to activate and create economy from our downtown spaces, but I don't want to do it at the neglect of our agricultural spaces.
Can we also throw farm stands in on that one? I know staff has brought that up before.
Say it again.
Can we also throw farm stands in on that request? I know staff has brought that up before, that the current requirements are a little off.
Okay.
Yeah, I would support that.
Okay. And Amy, or anybody else? Amy, go ahead.
Yeah, so I just wanted to make a public statement to my colleagues here on the planning board. I hold all members of the Lewiston Planning Board in very high esteem. In my experience, this board has routinely listened closely to presentations and public input, has held productive, inquisitive, and respectful conversations, and has engaged in respectful debates and dialogue that have resulted in transparent and well-reasoned votes. I'm proud to be a member of this board. In the City Council meeting on October 3rd, it came to light that some members of the council were interested in testing the integrity of this board. And one councilor, Robert McCarthy, slandered 2 of our members. On October 16th, I made an initial request to Mr. McCarthy via email for a public apology, which resulted in an October 17th statement that reads, "I want to apologize to 2 planning board members, Josh Najin and Amy Smith. They were swept up into this political fiasco, and I should not have publicly called them out at the last meeting. I'm sorry for that." So tonight, I just want to state publicly that I do not accept that apology. In a sincere apology, you say very specifically what it is that you're apologizing for. You show that you understand why it was bad, take ownership, and show that you understand why you caused hurt. You don't make excuses, and you definitely say why it won't happen again. On October 20th, I requested a more sincere and detailed apology, and this morning invited him here tonight to deliver that apology during public comment, and that did not happen. I cannot speak for Mr. Najin or for my fellow planning board members, but below is an apology that I personally would find acceptable. I admit that I made mistakes and I'm taking full responsibility for my actions. First, it was wrong to coordinate with 3 other city councilors to plan a meeting at the Cage that was designed to test the integrity of planning board members. It was wrong to characterize that meeting as a friendly celebration of mutual progress when in fact the topics of conversation were premeditated and, I quote, "a plant to see who we could trust." Second, it was wrong to publicly slander both Amy Smith and Josh Najin, stating for the public record, and still available on YouTube, that we can't trust Josh Najin and we can't trust Amy Smith because of their alleged activities following the meeting at the Cage. I relied on hearsay and third-party information to form those opinions. I recant those statements in full and honestly believe that both are trustworthy individuals. I should have approached them directly and privately with my concerns and then formulated my opinion. I ask their forgiveness for the personal harm that my actions have caused. I promise that in the future I will take the time to verify facts with primary sources before offering a public opinion. I sincerely hope we hear from Mr. McCarthy publicly soon in the near future, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you. And Josh, did you have something you wanted to say?
Not at this moment.
Okay. All right, in that case, we'll move on to reading of the minutes.
Can I just jump in and go back to Shanna's comment?
Sure.
About the hoop houses, and then Alex added the farm stands. I think, Shanna, you were asking for the board to kind of gauge like whether there was broad interest, and I heard from 2 members. Could I just get general like head nods that you would like to see us take this up?
Sure, absolutely. Michael?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Because I didn't quite understand what was being, I heard hoop houses.
Yeah.
Well, what's being asked?
Well, so Alex brought up some good points, and there's a lot of work to expand economic activity on agricultural land in our larger area. And so there's state guidance to consider hoop houses equipment and not a structure, which is separate from a greenhouse, which is a structure, has a foundation, has lighting, and a bunch of other things, and so carry on. But that a hoop house would be seen as equipment, in the same way that you put it up, take it down, or move it when the land or the seasons require
So
it.
definitions?
Yeah, I think it would be a definition, and then that, my hope would be that whatever way in which you either did that with a definition or named it in the use bulk tables or whatever, allows hoop houses to be handled as a matter of equipment on agricultural land and not require that process for the applicant or for us.
Yeah, so they wouldn't have to come before the planning board like they have the last couple of times.
I just need to better
Yeah,
understand.
no, that's fine. That's it, yeah, okay. All right, everybody understand? Everybody, interested in that? Yes, okay. Joshua?
Just, do you have the guidance that the Good Food Council of Lewiston Auburn presented, or I don't know if they presented it to just administration or if it came to staff at all?
I don't believe that they have finalized their recommendations. So I'm not sure that that's available yet, although in maybe a draft form it could be.
I just think that might be
Yep.
another piece of it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, then moving on. Reading of the minutes. I need a motion to adopt the September 25th, 2023 draft minutes.
So moved.
I think there was a correction. I didn't respond back to the email because I wasn't sure if everybody was on it. So, but I think I had brought up in another business on the 25th, I believe, speaking to some of our challenges with the main DOT roads, and then that's how the conversation with Mary Ann Benchek came about, I believe. Almost 100% sure on that.
And it was that day?
Yeah, it was
I do not recall. I do not recall.
I don't either.
So if that is correct, then
There's a recording.
Yeah.
You did mention that. I remember you mentioning
Okay,
that. So
yeah, just maybe if it's
that's how
noted in
I
the minutes
definitely
that
said, hey,
that's how
maybe we'll
that
get Mary Ann
connection
to show up
came,
and give us an update.
Okay, so with that amendment, would somebody make that amendment?
Yeah, I motion to approve the minutes of the September 25th meeting with an amendment to 5A 1 and 2. I guess
Right.
Alexander Pine would be considered the first paragraph, and Josh's comments the second paragraph.
Okay,
So an insertion of number 2 under that number 5,
okay.
Roman numeral 5.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, and I'll call the roll. Roger Dupree?
Yes.
Joshua Najin?
Yes.
Michael Marcotte?
Yes.
Shanna Cox?
Yes.
Christine Kittredge?
Yes.
Amy Smith?
Yes.
Lucy Bisson, yes. Okay, and then I'll have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second, okay, everybody ready? Okay. Unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. If folks have muscles, can they help me carry some of these chairs out in the hallway? Sure. Just to.
It's like it's election season around here or something.
To do my shut